Chapter 405. Sorry to bother you. Walking into Zhang Hai's villa, Wallace Kirk said to Zhang Hai with a smile. It's okay, I'm bothering you. Hearing Wallace Kirk's words, Zhang Hai said with a smile and waved his hand casually. Beer or coffee? Watching the three people in front of him sit down, Zhang Hai also walked to the refrigerator and asked them. Coffee is good. We have something to do when we go back. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the three looked at each other and said. Zhang Hai also took out 3 cans of coffee from the refrigerator and heated them in the machine next to him. Zhang Hai brought them over and then sat down in front of the 3 people. For Zhang Hai, he knew 2 of the 3 people who came here. The old man sitting in the middle is none other than Wallace Kirk, the mayor of Winthrop. Next to Mayor Wallace Kirk, there are 2 men in police uniforms. The man sitting on the left is called Murray Smith. He is also an old man. This man is none other than the current chief of the Winthrop Police Department. Zhang Hai had seen him a long time ago, when he was attacked by a group of delinquents in Winthrop, and when the Winthrop Police Department broke out in a scandal, he came to ask Zhang Hai for help. Finally, it was settled through private negotiations. This man and Zhang Hai are old acquaintances. It is normal for him to come and explain this incident. As for the last person, he looks about 30 years old. It is said that he has just graduated from the police academy. But why is he here? Zhang Hai didn't ask in detail. If this person is not the nephew of Wallace Kirk and Murray Smith, he may be someone with some background, but Zhang Hai doesn't care about this. Zhang Hai is not afraid of anyone. Mr. Zhang, this time, there may be some trouble. Taking a sip of coffee, Wallace Kirk looked at Zhang Hai and hesitated. Now, it is the afternoon when those people came to Zhang Hai's house to make trouble. After the police arrested these people, they managed to get a lot of information out of them. It was because of this that Mayor Wallace Kirk came to Zhang Hai to explain the situation. What? Is the other party very powerful? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai froze for a moment. Are those people more than just delinquents? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Wallace Kirk glanced at Murray Smith and motioned for him to speak. Murray took out a small notebook and began to talk to Zhang Hai. No, they are just some low-level guys. According to them, they are delinquents in the South District of Boston. The boss is called Billy Wallen. This guy actually seems to have a lot to do with you, Mr. Zhang. We called Boston to confirm that he was just a low-level guy. Looking at Zhang Hai, Murray Smith told Zhang Hai who his opponent was this time. According to Murray Smith, this guy named Billy Wallen was just a small lackey. He had a lot to do with Zhang Hai. First, when Zhang Hai was attacked for the first time, there were 2 people in charge. One was Faraday Wilson, and the other was Bunyan Wallen. Bunyan Wallen was Billy Wallen's younger brother, but at that time, he did not have the basic ability to be cocky with Zhang Hai. The second thing was that when Zhang Hai rescued Delina and the others, the men who originally controlled them, the boss above them was Billy Wallen's original boss. Because of Zhang Hai's intervention, not only did they lose a lot of income, but the police in Boston also cracked down on them for a while in order to give an explanation to Zhang Hai. The original boss wanted to escape to Europe at this time, but he was killed as soon as he went to sea. During that period of power vacuum, Billy Wallen used money from who knows where to organize a group of people. The second attack on Zhang Hai, which was the most dangerous one, now seemed to be vaguely pointing to Billy Wallen. But later, after he found that Zhang Hai was not easy to deal with, for some reason, he hid for a while. But no one knew where he got the news from, or what. But he actually wanted to attack Zhang Hai's manor. And this time, although the other party was threatening, they did not invade Zhang Hai's territory, and there was no substantial threat. There was a lawyer in the other party's team, and they did not even say anything racist. Obviously, it was impossible to sue them. The best result was that Zhang Hai beat them up for nothing, and then these people would be released after 48 hours. For this, Murray Smith could only come over and apologize to Zhang Hai. What does that mean? I know that these people want to harm me, but I can't arrest them? Looking at Murray Smith in front of him, Zhang Hai frowned. He was not afraid of thieves stealing, but he was afraid of thieves thinking about him. Now that he was being thought about by others all day, Zhang Hai was not comfortable. I'm here to tell you that I will strengthen the defense here again. I will patrol your place 24 hours a day, and there are 2 police cars stationed here. This is Doyle George, the main person in charge of the defense here. You can ask him to do anything, and it's best not to leave your place in the next few days. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Murray Smith shook his head helplessly. In fact, to be honest, he was not willing to do so. He also wanted to go and arrest them directly. After all, if he curried favor with Zhang Hai, whether it was for public or private reasons, it would only be beneficial to them. But after all, this was a world where laws were spoken. Although in the United States, the rich were the law, and the police were the best bodyguards for the rich. Just like Zhang Hai now, having a special police officer to protect him and stand guard for him, this was his privilege. Hearing Murray Smith introduce himself, the seemingly young police officer nodded to Zhang Hai. Compared to Mayor Wallace Kirk and Murray Smith, who were almost fawning over Zhang Hai and had an extremely humble attitude, this young man's attitude was much more familiar to Zhang Hai. He felt that the police in China had this kind of expression when handling cases. Then I'll have to trouble you. Looking at Murray Smith, Zhang Hai also nodded, indicating that he would have to trouble them. After glancing at Zhang Hai, Murray Smith thought for a moment and said to Zhang Hai, "By the way, in addition to the police, we don't know how the other party will infiltrate here. If the other party wants to attack by force, it will be troublesome, so if you need, our police station can lend you some equipment." Although guns were not banned in the United States, the only guns that could be bought by civilians were semi-automatic guns, which could not be fired continuously. One bullet at a time, if it was against automatic weapons, the firepower would indeed be somewhat lacking. And to obtain automatic weapons, there were two ways. One was to have a special gun license. Like Bell Lester, he had a license to use automatic weapons and sniper rifles, but he was unwilling to kill people. The other way was to hold a license privately, but if you want to buy it, other than the black market and the army, only the police station had it. In order to please Zhang Hai, Murray Smith was ready to borrow guns. Of course, these guns were registered to the police station near Zhang Hai's house, but they were given to Zhang Hai to use. Hearing Murray Smith's words, Zhang Hai frowned. Indeed, this was Murray Smith's move to please Zhang Hai, but on the other hand, these people might really attack Zhang Hai's manor. There are so many desperados in the United States. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. To be honest, he was very lazy and afraid of trouble. If the United States was always so troublesome, then should he consider changing places? But it was useless to say this now, because the first thing Zhang Hai had to do now was to guard against possible attacks. The government has always wanted to ban guns over the years, but when the United States was first established, it relied on not banning guns to win the majority of the people's consent from the Europeans. It is not easy to abolish the ban on guns. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace Kirk also sighed. Among all the peaceful countries, the United States had the highest number of shootings every year. Obviously, for any government, guns were not a good thing. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also shrugged his shoulders. To be honest, the ban on guns was also a very important point for the United States to attract people to travel and play. For example, in China, there were too few people who had played with guns. This was also one of the main reasons they came here to play. Zhang Hai immediately called Bell Lester. Compared to raising cattle, Bell Lester was more proficient in this area. When he heard that someone was eyeing Zhang Hai's manor and might attack, Bell Lester was very excited. Whether it was Mayor Wallace or Director Smith, they all knew what this sunny boy used to do. To be honest, they were quite relieved to have him by Zhang Hai's side. After briefly explaining the situation here, Bell took stock of the weapons in the manor. It seemed to be the same, but no one would complain about having too little firepower, so it was reasonable to borrow some equipment from the police station. After everyone made the decision, Zhang Hai drove with Bell to the police station. They were going to look for equipment there. At the same time, Zhang Hai also called Moses Adams. He still had some things to ask him to do. Since the last time he spent money to solve the problem in Miami, Zhang Hai felt that rich people should spend money to solve their problems. But it was not convenient for him to do these things, so it was good for Moses Adams to do it. Chapter 406. Wow, you have quite a variety of things here. Following Murray Smith, Zhang Hai brought Bell to the Winthrop police station. After greeting the local police, they entered the armory. As soon as they walked in, Bell could not help but exclaim softly. Indeed, although the Winthrop police station did not look big, because it was by the sea, it was also considered a border defense. Therefore, The armory of the police station here was the best in terms of quantity and quality among all the armory of the standing police station. Looking around, there were a lot of guns in this room that was about 100 square meters. There were guns hanging on the walls on the floor, and in some developed partitions that looked like locker rooms, there were also many guns. Basically, there were all kinds of long guns, rifles, and shotguns. These were the most important ones. Among these guns, there was one that Zhang Hai was very familiar with. He also had an August at home. However, the difference was that the August here was not the kind that could fire a bullet with a pull of the trigger. Instead, it was an automatic gun. If the trigger was not released, it would continuously fire. Other than the August, the most common guns were the M16 and the M4. In fact, in the eyes of some people who did not know much about guns, there was no difference between the M16 and the M4. When Zhang Hai played Counter-Strike, which was also known as Counter-Strike, he often called the 43 used by the police an M16, but it was actually an M4. Those who really knew guns understood that there was a big difference between these two guns. The M16 was an automatic rifle, while the M4 was a carbine. Carbines were also in the category of rifles. However, because the barrel was short, the shooting accuracy was high, and the gun itself was light, so it was considered a strategic weapon. Those who read military literature often knew that in a war, an area of effect attack was required. Rifles were specifically aimed at enemies within 100 to 300 meters. Beyond 300 meters, machine guns were used to suppress enemies. Within 50 meters, it was the territory of submachine guns. Between 50 and 100 meters, there was a vacuum period. The existence of the carbine was to make up for this vacuum period. Logically speaking, an M4 would be sufficient for a police gun. The M16 was not originally intended for police stations. This type of rifle was exclusively used by the military. However, after the 9/11 incident in the United States, the M16 was widely promoted to police stations. However, they were a few generations younger than the military. For example, the military was currently using M16A4S, while there were only M16A1S and A2S here. In addition, there were long guns and shotguns. There were two types of shotguns. One was brown and ordinary, and the other was green. The green ones were anti-riot. They used number 12 beanbag bullets. They didn't have much penetrating power, but they were quite painful. One shot wouldn't turn you into a sieve, but it would break your bones in an instant. It was similar to the rubber bullets used in the earliest escort vehicles in China. In addition to these more common guns, there were many special weapons. There weren't many of these weapons, but there were many of them. For example, there were various sniper rifles. Although there were only one or two of each model, they were enough to be used. For example, there were Matley M109, SVD, AW50, AS50, M24, and so on. There were also many rifles such as the beautiful XM8 Scar and so on. However, these weren't what Zhang Hai and Bell wanted. Although they wanted to take a few guns back, these guns were only borrowed by Zhang Hai. After this incident, they would have to be returned. Moreover, these guns and bullets were all labeled. If Zhang Hai played around with them, there would be trouble. Moreover, borrowing guns from the Winthrop Police Department was also risky. It was better to borrow as little as possible. After looking around, Zhang Hai and Bell discussed for a while and decided to borrow 3 guns. In the manor, other than Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy, the other men had guns. Although they only had handguns and shotguns, their defense was enough. However, their defense was more or less sufficient. What they lacked now was long-range firepower. Bell already had a sniper rifle, and that was enough. However, the suppressive firepower was not enough. Therefore, out of the 3 guns, they chose a submachine gun. This was the best weapon for close combat within 50 meters. This gun was the MP5, which was known as the king of submachine guns. Of course, it was not the original version. It had been modified a long time ago. It was now called the MP5K. There was no stock, so the weight was reduced, but the speed was increased, and the combat effectiveness was improved again. In addition to this gun, Bell also chose an MG36. This gun was actually not very popular with gun enthusiasts because this gun was an evolved version of the MG36. It fired 5.56 NATO bullets, which were not very powerful. This gun was not a real machine gun, nor a light machine gun. At most, it was a piece of equipment to supplement continuous firepower. However, in the eyes of professionals, this gun was quite good. It was light and accurate. Although the shooting speed was a little slow, as long as it was not a real war between big countries, it would be a good weapon. Whether it was used for anti-terrorism or suppression, it was a good choice. There were many people in the Delta who used it. After choosing these two guns, Murray Smith also gave Bell 3 basic sets of bullets. Now, there was only one gun left. In fact, according to Bell, these 2 guns were enough. However, considering that Zhang Hai had not played with them yet, he decided to let Zhang Hai look at them again. This was one of the ways to please the boss. Can I take this gun? Looking at the guns here, Zhang Hai was honestly very interested. But to choose one of these guns, he was a little hesitant. Just as he did not know how to choose, he suddenly found a big guy in a corner. This guy was really quite big and thick. Especially the gun with several barrels tied together. Zhang Hai suddenly had a feeling that he liked it very much. This gun was similar to the revolving machine gun used by the Terminators in the Terminator movies. It looked really fierce. This is fine, but where do you put it? Put it on the roof? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Murray Smith hesitated and asked Zhang Hai because he really did not think that Zhang Hai would use this gun. In fact, it was just that he did not think about it. Since this gun was sent to the police station, they have not used it. This gun was called a Gatling M134. It was a rapid-fire machine gun, but it was basically fixed. 7.62mm bullets were definitely a huge killing machine now. Generally speaking, this kind of gun was installed on planes and ships. In the Army's battle, the number of times it was used was not too many because this gun could penetrate any steel pipe or reinforced concrete building within a range of 100 meters. Such a killing machine was really easy to accidentally injure. The firing rate of each of the 6 barrels was about 950 rounds. In theory, the firing rate could reach 6,000 rounds per minute. So after this thing was sent here, it has been many years, maybe more than 10 years, since then, no one has used this thing except for Li Xing's protection. Now that Zhang Hai asked, Maris Smith subconsciously answered. Then I'll take this. Why put it on the roof? I can hold it myself. Thinking about holding this thing in his hands, Zhang Hai was really a little excited. He walked over and used his right arm, and in an instant, this big thing was lifted up by Zhang Hai. This gun did not include the ammunition feeder and motor, and its empty weight was 15.9 kilograms. With these 2 things installed, it weighed 26 kilograms. That was 26 kilograms, not 26 kilograms. It was the weight of a bag of rice, and there was a lot of recoil when it was fired. Now that they heard Zhang Hai's words, Maris Smith and Bell both smiled. That boss, you are strong, but to hold this thing and fire directly. This is reality, after all, not a movie. Looking at Zhang Hai, Bell Lester said a little awkwardly. He had been in the Delta for so many years, but he had never seen anyone who could hold such a heavy machine gun and fire directly. Why don't we try it? Hearing Bell's words, Zhang Hai also smiled, and then walked into the shooting range behind the police station. When they walked in, there were many new police officers practicing in the shooting range. In the United States there were almost no police schools. More than 90% of the policemen were recruited by the government. Most of these people were veterans or ordinary people with no criminal records. Winthrop was a big tourist attraction, and there were many tourists, so naturally, they needed more policemen. Therefore, during the construction of the town, they also expanded the police force. The police in the town now were not like before, where there were only 20 people. Now there were more than 50 police officers in the town, but the remaining 30 or so were all new and still needed to practice. Seeing Zhang Hai walk over, most of the policemen here actually knew him. After all, he was the richest man in Winthrop. Even if they had just arrived, they were assigned to patrol around Zhang Hai's manor. At first, they were a little unhappy. But when their weekly salary came, their dissatisfaction disappeared. This was their god of wealth, and they had to protect it. Now that they saw Zhang Hai walk over with an M134, they all looked at him curiously. Zhang Hai and the others were not careless. They walked to an empty target, and Zhang Hai waved to the side. The staff in charge of the shooting range in the police station came up and installed the motor and ammunition feeder for Zhang Hai. Of course, there were also 100 bullets in it. This was also the standard configuration of this kind of gun. If the force was strong enough, It could be dragged on the ground like a chain of bullets and no one would care. Looking at the gun in front of him, it was ready. Zhang Hai could not help but take a deep breath and take a lunge to offset the recoil. At the same time, he stared at the paper figurine in front of him. His hand was on the trigger, and as he pulled it gently, a series of sounds spread throughout the shooting range. Chapter 407. Pa! With a crisp sound, in a room in the south of Boston, Billy Wallen, with a gloomy face, threw the glass of vodka in his hand heavily on the floor. The broken glass instantly exploded in all directions, but none of the people standing in the room avoided it. They all lowered their heads and stood there without looking sideways. This guy is digging his own grave. I kindly extended my little finger to him, but he didn't hold it tightly. Instead, he dared to grab my people. He must be tired of living, Billy Wallen said with a gloomy face as he narrowed his eyes. Yesterday, after he heard that Zhang Hai was making money, he was tempted. In fact, if it was some large consortium or plutocrat making money, people like him would not dare to show off. In fact, half a year ago, he would not have dared to show off to Zhang Hai either. However, his development in the past 6 months had made him a little arrogant. In South Boston, he had always regarded himself as the overlord of the underworld. Zhang Hai did not give him any face this time. This was hard for him, who had recently become arrogant, to accept. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was just a rich man from the countryside. What could he do with money? He had more than 1,000 men and hundreds of guns. Not to mention rebelling here, it was not a problem for him to make trouble for Zhang Hai. Originally, in his opinion, giving Zhang Hai $3 million was already too much. But Zhang Hai did not give him any face at all. This made him want to kill him because Zhang Hai's manner was really a delicious piece of fat meat for him. Zhang Hai caused the death of his former boss. He did not care because if his former boss did not die, he would not have been able to sit in this position. Zhang Hai caused his brother to go to prison. He also did not care. In their line of work, even if they died, they could not blame anyone. However, Zhang Hai was guarding a large pile of wealth and was not willing to let him touch it. This made him very unhappy. "You guys go and teach him a lesson," Billy Wallen said with hatred as he sat gloomily on the chair. Although he couldn't wait to shoot Zhang Hai to death and then take over his manor, he knew that it was impossible. If he showed up, even if Zhang Hai died, he would have to run away. A billionaire was killed in his own home. If the American authorities didn't kill him, how would they explain it to their citizens? Therefore, he wasn't too stupid and knew to let his underling go. The people around him were all outlaws. Their job was to lick the blood on the blade. After hearing Billy Wallen's words, they lowered their heads and walked out of the room one by one. That night, phone calls were made from these people's phones. Although Billy Wallen claimed to have thousands of subordinates, most of them were just ordinary gangsters. If you asked these hooligans to sell flour, guard a place, or guard a gate, they wouldn't care. However, if you asked them to fight, they would have to think twice. If they had to use guns to fight, then half of them would probably run away. If they had to attack a billionaire's manor with guns, then they wouldn't go no matter what. It was precisely because of this that these people found some people who were loyal. However, because the relationship between the police and Zhang Hai was very good, these underlings who couldn't fight had other uses, which was to block the road. Zhang Hai's manor was located in the middle of Winthrop and Boston. There was only a two-way 4-lane road there. As long as the road was blocked, it would be impossible for the Winthrop police and Boston police to come. However, these underlings still dared to block the road. As the phone calls were made, more and more people gathered in the Boston area. As soon as the people gathered, the Boston police, who had been watching these people, immediately sent news. After receiving the news, the Winthrop police chief, Murray Smith, also immediately sent a message to Zhang Hai. At this time, Zhang Hai was at home discussing with Moses Adams how to deal with Billy Wallen. In Zhang Hai's view, the best way to deal with Billy Wallen was naturally to spend money to get rid of him, just like in Miami. However, after asking the local tyrant, Moses Adams, Zhang Hai knew that this might not be very reliable. This was because Boston had originally been the domain of the Gray Gang since ancient times. After the American government regained control of Boston, the impact of Boston's management was huge. It was a huge blow to Boston. Before Billy Wallen, Boston didn't even have a Gray Gang with more than 100 members. Of course, this was referring to the subordinates, not the businesses they controlled. After all, Their businesses still needed ordinary people to run, such as waiters and doormen. These were not considered their staff. The main reason why Billy Wallen could expand so quickly was that he had the financial support of some people in Huaxia. The United States was a capitalist country, and money meant everything. Even if they knew that the other party was the Grey Gang, as long as the money was in place, the police wouldn't dare to make a move without enough evidence. Of course, this was also because the other party had been established for too short a time, and too much evidence had not been formed yet. If they stayed for another 1 or 2 years, the evidence would be conclusive, and the Grey Gang would not be far from destruction. Boston was one of the key cities of the Federation. It was precisely because of this that there were not enough forces to accept Zhang Hai's business. Rewards could be offered in Miami, but not in Boston. Just as Zhang Hai was having a headache about how to deal with these guys, Murray Smith called. "It seems that you may not be able to go back today." Hanging up the phone, Zhang Hai looked at Moses Adams and shrugged. "Oh, it's really exciting to work with a boss like you, but I believe that you will protect me, right?" Looking at Zhang Hai's expression, and the fact that Zhang Hai did not deliberately avoid the sound of the phone call, Moses Adams himself heard some of the sound. He knew that the guy called Billy Wallen was about to make a move. "Get ready, the other party may be here soon." Zhang Hai looked at Moses Adams, picked up the walkie-talkie beside him, and spoke to everyone in the manor. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the people in the manor moved. Although it was because of Zhang Hai that they were put in danger, these people didn't care very much. Because they knew that this matter had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai was not a person who took the initiative to provoke trouble, but because some people were eyeing Zhang Hai's manor. Although Zhang Hai's men were the first to come here, they had only been with him for 8 months. But they did not panic or complain at this time. When Zhang Hai came back from the police station, he had already told them that the manor was in trouble now. Those who wanted to leave, Zhang Hai would not let them stay, but those who stayed had to protect the manor. Americans were quite desperate to protect their private property. No one left on the spot, and they made their own plans. As Zhang Hai's voice fell, the people in the villa area moved. Bell, Harriman Fells, Burkdollar, and Robbins Garcia all gathered in front of Zhang Hai's villa for the first time. In front of Zhang Hai's villa, they had modified the car that was originally parked there to form a protective wall. They would resist the enemy here, while Bell went to the roof. This was where he should be as a sniper. At this time, Zhang Hai was also sitting in front of his villa. Beside him was the M134 he borrowed, as well as a box of 2,000 bullets. He believed that these things would leave a deep impression on those people. Philip Turner's family, Tommy Charles's family, Eleanor Cece's family, Edward Anderson's family, Cyrus Gerard, and O'Connor Murphy gathered in Edward Anderson's villa, forming another crossfire site. Of course, Marin Rupert went to the hangar. If there was any trouble, he would send these people away by plane. In addition, helicopters could also be used for fighting. Finally, after receiving the news, Aphrodite and the others immediately came to Zhang Hai's villa. Even if they wanted to leave now, they had nowhere to go. When these people arrived in front of Zhang Hai's villa, 8 police cars drove over in the distance. In each of the 8 police cars, there were 4 policemen. These police cars formed the first protective wall outside the gate of Zhang Hai's villa. Zhang Hai, Robbins Garcia, and the others were lying in ambush in front of the villa. They formed the second layer of protection. If these 2 layers of protection were broken, it meant that God wanted Zhang Hai to die. When the time came, he would take everyone to the airport. If the villa was hit by a disaster, they could still rebuild it. If someone died, even if only one died, Zhang Hai would be sad for the rest of his life. This was also the escape route that they had discussed long ago. All the preparations continued. Everyone was smoking in boredom, enjoying the calm before the storm. Zhang Hai also smoked for the first time today. Zhang Hai was not a good kid. When he was in junior high, he was the most rebellious and curious, so he learned to smoke with his classmates. However, because of the winter in Bing City, smoking was too uncomfortable. In his second year of high school, he used his willpower to quit. Later, when he went to work, he also did not have any pressure and did not pick up cigarettes. Later, when his parents got into an accident, although it was resolved because of Chile, he did not smoke again. At this time, he really felt some pressure. The dozens of people in the villa were under his control. However, after smoking a few cigarettes, Zhang Hai could not help but frown. To be honest, he was still not used to smoking. But even if it was just a pipe, it was fine. He was also killing time. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, and Dai Feng were beside him. Because Xueqi could not fly and could not be used as a scout, it was left in the villa. These three guys seemed to have felt the calm before the big battle. They were all lying there, and the atmosphere was quite tense. Chapter 408. Mr. Zhang Hai, the latest news says that they have left Boston. It's about half an hour's drive away from here. If you leave now, it's still not too late. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, a policeman walked into Zhang Hai's manor. Looking at this policeman, not only Zhang Hai, but even Robbins and the others smiled disdainfully. Hide. They really don't know how to do that. Is this your idea, or Murray Smith's? But Zhang Hai raised his head with a cigarette in his mouth, looked at the policeman in front of him, and said indifferently. Zhang Hai naturally knew this policeman. During the day, he came with Murray Smith and Wallace Mayer. His name is Doyle George. Zhang Hai didn't know what he did, but he knew that this guy's family was not ordinary. Otherwise, it would be impossible to ask him, a newcomer, to be in charge of Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai was born to be poor, so he didn't have a good impression of some of the second generation. Even if he was rich now, he still didn't have a good impression of the second generation. Whether it was the second generation of an official or a rich second generation, as long as it was the second or third generation, Zhang Hai wouldn't be happy. So when he heard his words, Zhang Hai's words were still a bit harsh. Naturally, it's my idea. But when he heard Zhang Hai's words, the man didn't care, but continued. Then we'll wait until you hear from Maris Smith. We won't leave until we see him. Zhang Hai fiercely took a puff of the cigarette in his mouth. He blew out a smoke ring and said indifferently, "Is money really so important? More important than life?" Looking at Zhang Hai, the policeman thought that Zhang Hai didn't want to leave because he didn't want to leave his manor. Indeed, if Zhang Hai left and these people entered Zhang Hai's manor, it would really cause a lot of losses. But compared to life, no matter how much money was, it was not as important as life in his eyes. Life is naturally important. Money is also important. Do you know how much my manor is worth? Now, not to mention other things, just the land and cattle are worth $5 billion. Otherwise, why do you think Wallace and Murray sent so many people here? Don't be kidding. Okay, little policeman, you just do your job. If you can't resist in a while, you can retreat first. We have a plane, and it's fast if we want to leave. Zhang Hai threw the cigarette butt in his mouth to the ground and stamped it out. Then he looked at the policeman in front of him with a serious face. This little policeman only knew that Zhang Hai's manor was worth some money, but he really didn't know how much it was worth. It was like a child in the city in China. It was difficult to know how much a developed mountain in the countryside was worth. In their eyes, how much could a wild mountain be worth? But they didn't know that a mountain with development value would be worth at least $100 million. Zhang Hai's manor was definitely worth much more than a small hill in China. Zhang Hai couldn't just give up like this. We won't retreat because our orders are to guard here. Since you already have a backup plan and don't want to leave, then so be it. Hearing that Zhang Hai's manor was worth so much money, the policeman didn't say anything else. Although the world was shouting that life was priceless, how much was a human life really worth? In China, if someone was hit by a car and died in an accident, the compensation would basically be $200,000 or $300,000, which was already not bad. If someone died in a medical accident during treatment in the hospital, the compensation would only be tens of thousands, or even nothing. If there was a conflict and someone accidentally killed someone, the compensation would be even less because they would be sentenced. So, how much was a civilian's life worth? It was definitely not worth $5 billion. So Zhang Hai wanted to protect this place. He didn't say anything, turned around and left Zhang Hai's side, went outside, and prepared to set up a defense. This kid is a bit interesting. Looking at the man's back as he left, Zhang Hai lit up a cigarette and started smoking. The only gun they borrowed today was the M134 in Zhang Hai's hand. They didn't borrow any other guns because Robbins and the others didn't know how to use them. Just as Zhang Hai was talking to this guy, a convoy of about 30 cars had already set off from Boston. These people weren't stupid. They knew that if they rushed over so blatantly, they would probably be stopped before they could get there. As soon as they left Boston, the police would definitely stop them. So when they were in Boston, only 5 cars came out. The rest of the cars went out in batches at different times and times. After they passed the airport, they were reunited. At this time, the police found out that the other party didn't just send 5 cars, but a total of 30. There were all kinds of cars in the 30 cars. Most of them were sedans, but there were also many vans and commercial vehicles. According to the news from Boston, most of these cars were full of people. There were almost 200 people in 30 cars. When this number was reported, it really scared a lot of people. Winthrop and Boston sent reinforcements to Zhonghai's manor almost at the same time, but unfortunately, these people were really bad. On the way, many cars broke down on the road. Needless to say, their purpose was to stop the police cars. After all, there was no direct evidence that these people were related to Billy Wallen's gang. Although this could not stop the police for too long, even if it was only for half an hour, everything was unknown. After receiving the news, Zhonghai's face also changed. He originally thought that the other party would only send 30 or 50 people, but he did not expect that there would be hundreds of people. This time it was really troublesome. Outside, Doyle George's face was also very ugly. After all, they were the first line of defense. If they were finished, everything would be over. At this moment, he repositioned the car to prevent the other party from increasing their line of attack while reducing their line of attack. At the same time, Winthrop immediately sent police cars, but to their surprise, the driveway from Winthrop to Zhonghai's manor was also blocked. It seemed that this Billy Wallen was not an idiot. He had already calculated everything. This time, although the conflict had not yet started, it was already a big event. The authorities of Boston and the county of Winthrop immediately sent messages to the government of Massachusetts and the federal authorities of the United States. But distant water could not quench a nearby fire. Everything was moving in a bad direction. Mr. Zhang, now is your last chance. You can still leave by helicopter. Just as the bad news came one after another, Doyle George's voice came from Zhonghai's walkie-talkie. He was still persuading Zhonghai to leave. Thank you, but I'm still going to fight. Listening to Doyle George's words, Zhonghai frowned. The battle began. Not long after Zhonghai's voice fell, the sound of brakes could be heard in the distance. Then, a motorcade consisting mainly of vans and commercial vehicles rushed towards Zhonghai's manor like a gust of wind. The motorcade in front, listen, stop immediately for inspection. Otherwise, we will shoot. Looking at the cars rushing over, they would definitely not shoot first. Doyle George shouted loudly into the walkie-talkie. Unfortunately, these cars didn't care about the police. When they accelerated instead of slowing down, they stepped on the accelerator and crashed into the first defensive wall formed by the 8 police cars in front of them. A loud bang was heard. The cars in front crashed directly into the police cars. The impact of the collision not only shocked the people in the cars, but also shocked the people in the cars. Even the police hiding behind the cars were shaken. At this time, a few cars directly jumped over the police cars and wanted to hit the gate. Seeing this, Doyle George did not hesitate. Since the other party crashed into the police cars, even if they did not shoot, it was a declaration of war. He immediately ordered, "Fire!" Then the police who were still conscious immediately took out the weapons in their hands and shot at the cars in front of them. But at this time, the vans that were originally blocking them also opened, and a group of people ran out. They quickly retreated to the back of the cars and began to take the initiative to attack the police. People were threatening. Between a close attack and a car far away, people would subconsciously choose to attack closer. So many police officers turned their muzzles at once. And this was what these people hoped for. Billy Wallen did have hundreds of guns, but these guns were all small pistols and non-automatic weapons. Fighting with the police was courting death. There was a huge gap in firepower. He did not want to provoke the police, so his main purpose now was to attract the police. The key first target was Zhonghai. 2 of the cars were forced to stop as the police were distracted by the commotion. But there were still 5 cars that directly crashed through the protective fence outside Zhonghai's gate and went straight into Zhonghai's manor. Looking at the 5 cars rushing over, Zhonghai asked on the other side of the walkie-talkie, "Can I fire?" Of course. Doyle George on the other side said to Zhonghai while attacking these cars and people. The moment his voice fell, Zhonghai had already stood up from the ground. At the same time, he raised his little cutie, the borrowed M134. Looking at the 5 cars rushing over in front of him, Zhang Hai aimed a little and then pressed the button to fire. The first person who wanted to turn was shot by the monster in Zhang Hai's hand before he could move. The bullet pierced through the windshield of the car. His body tilted and fell on the steering wheel. Then, the car he controlled went off course. The car turned and hit another car. The 2 cars, one on the left and one on the right, directly flipped over on Zhang Hai's lawn. Chapter 409. Pai Pai. 2 commercial vehicles flipped over on the lawn and came to a stop. Of the 2 drivers in the vehicles, one was dead and the other was injured. As for the others, Zhang Hai did not know, but he could guess that these people were no longer a threat to Zhang Hai for the time being. Then, Zhang Hai looked at the other 3 vehicles. However, those 3 vehicles had already crossed over when Zhang Hai had taken care of the 2 vehicles. What a joke! Who would dare to drive a private vehicle into a place guarded by machine guns? Oh no, heavy machine guns. That person must have had enough of living. Although these people were fugitives, they still wanted to live when they could. After the vehicles stopped, the people in the 3 vehicles immediately climbed out and hid on the other side of the vehicles to avoid the bullets. Zhang Hai's machine gun also swept over the vehicles. The glass of these vehicles was all gone. Feeling the glass shards falling like rain above their heads, these people were a little confused. Are you kidding me? What kind of firepower is this? Is this bullshit? The person in charge of the attack with a small pistol in his hand, a guy with a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks, said with a look of disbelief. He felt as if he was in Africa. Perhaps even Africa was not as chaotic as this. And just as he was muttering there, Zhang Hai also finished his bullets. He had no choice but to retreat and reload. Feeling that the firepower outside had stopped, these people also heaved a sigh of relief. These cars were all standard commercial vehicles with 8 seats. Each car had 8 people in it, which was a total of 40 people. 2 of the vehicles had flipped over, and now there were only 24 people left. These 24 people were not to be trifled with. As soon as they saw that the firepower outside had stopped, they immediately wanted to rush out. They were now about 200 meters away from Zhang Hai's villa. If they were to shoot with pistols at this distance, they would really be shooting handguns. Who knew where they would fly to? The pistol only had an attack range of 50 meters, while Zhang Hai's M134 had an attack range of 300 to 2,500 meters. Therefore, if they wanted to destroy Zhang Hai, the first thing they had to do was to shorten the distance. In fact, if they drove, they would be able to cover 200 meters in a flash. However, the problem now was that they didn't dare to drive, so they could only run. However, this was the end of this bold person's life. The moment his head popped out, there was a loud bang. The guy's head exploded like a ripe watermelon hit by a baseball bat. Needless to say, the only person with such firepower was Bale. Wow, 10 points. Not bad. Although he had turned over a new leaf, Bale used to be a butcher whose hands were stained with blood. When he killed people, he didn't feel guilty or anything. In the past, he killed people for missions and for the country, so he might feel that it was unreal. But now, he killed people for the manor. He liked this job very much. He liked Zhang Hai. He liked this job. Of course, he liked the bonus that Zhang Hai gave him the most. In the whole of America, no, in the whole world, which cowboy could earn tens of thousands of dollars a year? Was there any cowboy who could give out $200,000 in a single bonus? He had killed so many people in the Triangle State for so many years, but he had only earned a few $1,000s as a reward. However, with Zhang Hai, he could get everything back. Most importantly, he could do what he liked the most. To him, this place was like heaven. There's a sniper too. Damn, which army is this? Looking at the headless bodies around them, these people were a little dumbfounded. How could they play like this? There was a heavy machine gun and a sniper. How could they have fun like this? At that moment, Zhang Hai reloaded his gun and used the suppressive fire. He already liked this kind of violent aesthetic feeling. While he was displaying his powerful firepower, on the other side of the 2 overturned cars, a door was slowly opened. Some people who had been hit by the cars crawled out. After taking a few deep breaths, they crawled towards Zhang Hai from the grass. At the same time they counted. In the 2 cars that Zhang Hai had overturned, there were a total of 16 people. But now, only 12 people had crawled out. The drivers of the 2 cars were dead. One was killed by Zhang Hai's machine gun, and the other was killed by the glass that popped out after the car overturned. The glass shards pierced into the arteries. If they called an ambulance now, they might be saved. However, the problem was that they couldn't call an ambulance now, so they could only wait for death. As for the remaining 2 people, they were behind the driver of the first car. Not only could the glass of the business car not block bullets, but even the seats in the human body could not block them. Zhang Hai's bullets pierced through 3 people before they died. Although 4 people died, now was not the time to be sad. Their mission was not completed yet. As soon as they moved, Goldie and Xiaobai had already reacted. They stood up quietly and slipped into the darkness. Not long after, they had quietly rushed towards the people over there. These people originally thought that Zhang Hai's attention on the main battlefield had been attracted by the people in the other 3 cars. They didn't expect that 2 monsters had already entered their hunting ground. The distance between them was slowly shrinking as they hid. 200 meters, 190 meters, 180 meters. When they were 150 meters away, 2 black shadows flashed in the darkness. The 2 people in front didn't even have time to call for help before they were pushed down. The moment they were pushed down, Goldie and Xiao Hei's teeth had already bitten the throats of the 2 people. Someone had done a test before. The bite force of crocodiles was ranked in the top 3 in the world. It was the Gulf crocodile, the Nile crocodile, and the alligator. The 4th was the spotted hunting dog with a bite force of 585 kilograms. Zhang Hai's Goldie and Xiaobai were not hunting dogs. However, after such a long time, with the nourishment of Zhang Hai's spirit energy, it was not impossible for these 2 guys to dominate the grassland in Africa, let alone hunting dogs. In an instant, a few bloody holes appeared in the throats of these 2 people. They unwillingly spat out blood and fell into a pool of blood. The situation of these 2 people attracted the attention of the people behind them. "Ah, there's something in the bushes." Seeing that 2 people had died, the 3rd person immediately shouted. Then, he immediately took out his gun and prepared to shoot. However, Goldie and Xiaobai instantly burrowed into the bushes. They were not stupid now. Their goal was to take a bite and leave. This noise also attracted the attention of Zhang Hai and the others. Immediately, Robbins Garcia and the others aimed the weapons in their hands at this side. Without saying a word, they pulled the triggers. Although they were using shotguns, the effective range of their shots was about the same as a handgun. Now that they were so far away, it was not wrong to say that they were shooting randomly. However, on the battlefield, the bullets that were aimed were sometimes not too fatal. Some random stray bullets were the most fatal. Therefore, these people immediately lay down when they heard the gunshots. However, this gave Xiaobai and Goldie another opportunity. Without saying a word, they circled behind these people. The 2 dogs attacked again and bit the throats of the last 2 people. In the blink of an eye, these 2 guys had killed 4 people. Zhang Hai had only killed 4 people up until now, while Bale had only killed 1. This was a remarkable result. "Charge or we're dead meat." Sensing that 2 more lives were slowly fading away, the second in command whispered to the person in charge. The person in charge thought about it and agreed. If they did not leave now, they would all die. "Bend over and charge." When he thought of this, the person in charge gave the order. The people around him quickly bent over and rushed towards Zhang Hai. Once they moved, Xiaobai and Goldie would not be able to make a move. However, the commotion still attracted Zhang Hai and Bale's attention. Zhang Hai still had to suppress the people in front, but Bale was much more relaxed. He immediately adjusted his aim and looked at the people aiming at their waists. They were really good people. With a crisp sound, the leader fell into a pool of blood. There was a wrist-sized hole in his chest. When they saw this, the remaining 9 people could not help but quicken their pace. If they did not charge, they were dead meat. A distance of 100 meters if they ran normally would only take 11 or 12 seconds. If they could run within 10 seconds, they would be qualified to participate in the Olympics. When they bent over, the time increased to 15 or 16 seconds. This also gave Bale a lot of opportunities. When he pulled the leash, aimed, and fired, Bale's attack was smooth. When these people were 50 meters away, where their pistols could be used, there were only 3 people left. When these 3 people came out of the bushes, Luo Binsi and the others aimed their weapons at them. Bang 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 bang. Continuous gunshots rang out. These people helplessly fell into a pool of blood. They never thought that Zhang Hai would have so many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Not only did he have a heavy machine gun, but he also had a sniper. Not to mention these stragglers. Even if the real police came, it would be a fool's dream to take down this manor without using heavy weapons. Bastard Henry and the others have been wiped out. The scene of the last 3 people falling down was clearly seen by the person who had been hiding behind the car. This person couldn't help but hit the cardboard. He was really a little confused. 2/5 of their strength was lost here just like that. Most importantly, according to the current situation, it was very likely that the remaining 3/5 of their strength would be very difficult to escape. Now they were really in a dilemma. There was a heavy machine gun and a sniper rifle. If they retreated, it was still the heavy machine gun and the sniper rifle. What should they do? Chapter 4:10. What should we do? What should we do? Feeling the bullets flying over their heads, the remaining 23 people looked anxiously at their leader and asked loudly. Now they couldn't advance or retreat. The other side could hit them, but they couldn't hit the other side. If they continued like this, then the police would come. At that time, the people on their side would really die. Intending to use force to destroy private property, murder charges could be said to be set on the board. Thinking of Zhang Hai's financial resources, if they went in, they would probably never be able to get out. As mentioned before, although these people were desperados, they didn't really want to die. In such a situation, they were really helpless. Hearing his words, the person who was asked had faint sweat on his forehead. He glanced at his watch and took a long breath. Hold on a little longer, hold on for 10 more minutes. After saying this to the person next to him, the man said with a cold face. On the other side, Zhang Hai had finished the 2nd bullet belt at this time. He couldn't help but start to load the 3rd bullet belt. In the movies, it said that a casual shot can make a car explode. I've already loaded so many bullets, the car won't explode. While loading the bullets, Zhang Hai said helplessly. Indeed, whether it was a movie or a TV series, the car would explode with a gunshot. But Zhang Hai has now asked for 200 bullets. Not to mention the car, there wasn't even a flame. In fact, a long time ago, someone had already done an experiment. Almost 99% of the bullets hitting a car wouldn't explode. In order to make a car explode, a total of 3 conditions must be met. First, the bullets must be shot into the fuel tank. Second, the bullets must rub against each other and cause an open flame. Third, the bullets must explode. Facts prove that it was not easy to meet these 3 conditions. The cars these people drove were all GMC business cars. This kind of car was also used as a police car in the police station. Its protective ability was quite good, especially the outside tendons. Although Zhang Hai's machine gun could penetrate the outermost tendon, it couldn't penetrate the inside. It was really not an easy thing to shoot into the fuel tank. Secondly, igniting an open flame was also very difficult. When the bullet was shot at high speed, it would not ignite an open flame when it pierced into metal. This included the walls of the fuel tank. If an experiment was done, it would be discovered that the bullets could penetrate the fuel tank and let the oil flow out. However, it was almost impossible to ignite an open flame. The only way was to use 2 bullets in one hole and let the bullets collide with each other inside the fuel tank. However, Zhang Hai was not using a sniper rifle. How could he get an open flame so easily? Thirdly, even if there was an open flame, it was basically impossible for it to explode. It was possible for it to burn, but explode? Hehe. Therefore, Zhang Hai didn't want to blow up the car. It wasn't realistic. After sitting down and reloading, Zhang Hai picked up the gun again. But this time, he didn't rush to shoot. There was no point in shooting at this time. The other party was hiding too well. They didn't shoot now because they were waiting for them to come out. They would kill them when they came out. However, the other party was no fool. Why would he come out at this time? Was he courting death? Moreover, Zhang Hai had run out of bullets. There was still a sniper in the car, okay? Compared to Zhang Hai, the sniper was more dangerous. The scene was in a deadlock for a while. Only the police outside and the gangsters were still fighting fiercely. As time passed by, Zhang Hai and the others relaxed. This was because they got the latest news that the police in Boston had broken through the roadblock. They would arrive in about half an hour. As long as they could hold on for half an hour, these people would die. Bang! Just as Zhang Hai and the others were preparing to go all out to deal with this half an hour, suddenly, a gunshot came from the villa. As soon as he heard this gunshot, Zhang Hai's heart thumped. He cursed in his heart. He immediately turned his head. Sure enough, the window of his room had been broken by a gunshot, and his room was where Daliana and the others were hiding. As for the other party, when they heard this gunshot, they couldn't help but laugh proudly. They knew that they had succeeded. Bell! Zhang Hai shouted and was ready to go back to the villa, but unfortunately, these people outside did not give him such an opportunity. Just as Zhang Hai was about to leave, these 23 people directly rushed out and rushed toward Zhang Hai's villa. Boss, I'll go. After immediately shooting 2 people, Bell put away his weapon and shouted at Zhang Hai below. Compared to suppressive fire, his sniper rifle was not as good as Zhang Hai's M134. Hearing his words, although Zhang Hai was anxious, he still decided to fight head-on. If both sides were not pleasing, then it would be really troublesome. In a flash, he left the hiding place. Zhang Hai also swept toward these people in front of him. In an instant, among the 21 people who were still alive, 6 of them were swept down by Zhang Hai and fell in a pool of blood forever. However, the remaining 15 people's reactions were not slow. They immediately lay down and continued to move toward Zhang Hai. If there was a sniper rifle now, then they would all be targets, but the problem now was that there was no sniper rifle. Damn English. Looking at the situation of these guys, he was still worried about Zhang Hai in the villa. He decided to change his strategy. Picking up his August, Zhang Hai jumped to the range shield on the first floor and began to pull the trigger. But the problem was that his August could indeed see the other party, but it was a semi-automatic weapon. The attack power was really a problem. After 5 bullets were fired, he had to change the magazine. When the other party heard Zhang Hai's gunshot, they also knew that this was an opportunity. As soon as the man gave the order, the person who was originally lying on the ground instantly jumped up and rushed towards Zhang Hai's side. Looking at these people rushing over, Luo Binci and others understood that the real difficult battle had just begun. On the other side, in the villa, the atmosphere was a bit strange. These people did invade Zhang Hai's home. There were a total of 6 people who invaded. These people parked their cars on the other side of Zhang Hai's manor. After the battle here began, they quietly sneaked in. They sneaked into Zhang Hai's villa and then blocked the women of Zhang Hai who were paying attention to the battle below. According to their original plan, after capturing these women, they would force Zhang Hai to negotiate. But they did not expect that the current situation was not as easy as they thought because it seemed that they had an internal strife. Knurson Peters, don't let me say it again. Come here immediately. Looking at the big man standing in front of this group of women, a man who was blind in one eye roared with a gloomy face. At this time, these 6 people were clearly divided into 2 groups. 5 people on one side were holding pistols in their hands, and opposite them was a 2-meter-tall big man with a gun in his hand, aiming at these people in front of him. Behind this big man were Delina, Marion, Aphrodite, Bernice, Little Ya, and 9 other girls. This group of girls was scared at this time. They looked at the situation in front of them with an incredible face. They did not know what to do. Run! The big man looked at the people in front of him and said to the girls behind him without looking back. Fortunately, Delina and the others were not good people before. Although they were nervous at this time, they were still able to talk. They slowly moved to the door according to the big man's words. Seeing that these people were about to run, the one-eyed man's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. Open fire! Along with the one-eyed man's order, the 5 pistols instantly opened fire. However, this big guy actually managed to block the 5 pistols, causing his body to explode with blood. However, his blocking gave Deliana and the others the opportunity to escape from Zhang Hai's room. Seeing Deliana and the others running away, the one-eyed man couldn't help but gnash his teeth in anger. Chase! Bang! Just when the 5 of them were about to chase after them, the big man who was lying on the ground suddenly opened fire and directly shot one of them in the chest. Seeing that the big man was still alive, the one-eyed man's face couldn't help but turn green. The remaining 4 people instantly rushed to the side to avoid the bullets. You 3 go and deal with the women below. I will deal with him. Looking at the big guy struggling to get up again, The killing intent in the one-eyed man's eyes became more intense. He said to the three men beside him. Hearing his words, the three men didn't say anything and directly went out of the room. Just when the big guy was attracted by the three men, the one-eyed man had already stood up. Bang bang! 2 consecutive sounds were heard. 2 blood flowers respectively appeared on the right shoulder and right leg of the big man. The pistol in his right hand was also instantly knocked away. At the same time, the big man's body trembled and he half knelt on the ground. Connerson Peters, to be honest, I originally appreciated you very much. You are big, brave and tough, but you actually betrayed us at this time. You are courting death. Looking at the big man's appearance, the one-eyed man walked over with a gloomy face. Although this big man didn't join them for a long time, everyone in the gang actually liked this guy very much. He didn't do too many bad things, wasn't greedy for money, and wasn't greedy for women. He was tough and wouldn't discount any mission. Such a person was indeed the best lackey in the eyes of the higher-ups. Unfortunately, this lackey had broken his teeth today. This is the home of my benefactor. I won't let you succeed. Clutching his bleeding wound, Connerson Peters' face was ghastly pale, but his eyes were still fixed on the one-eyed man. His eyes full of killing intent. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see it. Hearing the words of the big man, the one-eyed man came over and pointed the pistol directly at his head. His eyes were full of viciousness as he spoke. Connerson Peters sighed. If he had known that this was the home of his benefactor, he might have come earlier. If he had joined, perhaps the result would have been different. It seems that the favor of saving my life will have to be repaid in the next life. Thinking of this, Conrad closed his eyes. At this moment, bang! Chapter 4:11. Where are we going now? Outside? After escaping from the room, Bernice pulled Xueqi and asked with a pale face. She really didn't expect that she would encounter such an unexpected disaster while living in Zhang Hai's place. Who could she find to reason with? No, there is also a war outside. Come with me. Hearing her words, Aphrodite, who was running in front, hesitated for a moment, then gritted her teeth. She felt that she was the only one in this room who can help. Where are we going? Hearing that Aphrodite wasn't going to go outside, although Bernice was a little surprised, she still ran with her. But this time, Aphrodite didn't answer her. After coming to the first floor, she ran straight to a warehouse. In the surprised eyes of Bernice and the others, a bright room appeared in their sight. In this room, there was a bathroom, a water system, and in addition, there was an iron cage with a woman inside. This woman was sitting on the bed reading a book at this time. Seeing their arrival, the woman was a little stunned. I was wondering why you didn't come to deliver food tonight, you guys. What's the situation? Looking at Aphrodite in front of her, the woman closed the book and said to Aphrodite with a smile on her face, but looking at their panicked appearance, she was a little puzzled. There's no way, this warehouse is too thick. She really can't hear the sound outside at all from inside. Someone invaded the manor. If they catch us, it will be very bad for Zhang Hai, so we need your help. Walking to the front of the iron cage, Aphrodite looked at the woman in front of her and said with a serious face. She is. Bernice gently pulled Delina's sleeve from behind and asked curiously. An agent, Zhang Hai picked her up a while ago. Hearing her words, Delina actually didn't know much about this woman's details. She just heard Zhang Hai talk about her from time to time. She remembered that Zhang Hai said that this woman is very dangerous. Is it really okay to ask her for help? She is locked here. Doesn't it mean that she is very dangerous? She should have a hostile relationship with you. Hearing Delina's words, Bernice couldn't help but say anxiously. If they were friends, why would they be locked up? And from the looks of it, he had been locked up for quite some time. Sure, it depends on whether you believe me or not. As if she heard Bernice's words, the woman slowly stood up and said to Aphrodite. She then looked at Bernice provocatively. This woman was quite interesting. I believe you. Bernice hesitated for a moment, then took out a key and opened the door. As the door opened, the woman slowly walked out. Phew, the feeling of freedom. I don't really feel anything. The woman stretched lazily and smiled. Then, in an instant, she hit Aphrodite with her elbow. Her speed was so fast that Aphrodite couldn't react at all. Just as she was regretting it and feeling that she had invited a wolf into the house, the tip of the woman's elbow stopped at her forehead. I'm just teasing you. I'm very happy here. I have to thank you for taking care of me. Looking at Aphrodite's appearance, the woman chuckled, opened her elbow and turned it into a hand. After gently touching Aphrodite's head, she walked straight out of the warehouse. When she walked out of the warehouse, the three people just happened to catch up. Seeing her, the three people on this side opened fire. But unfortunately, this woman, Azalina Vicabrio, is not an ordinary person. Her reaction is much faster than these three people. She immediately shrank back and dodged their bullets. She casually picked up a few plates next to her and threw them aside after she finished eating. She began to count in her heart. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Although she had only taken a quick glance, she had already memorized the model of the weapon used by these people. It was a Glock 18 without an additional magazine, which meant that it only had the most basic 17 rounds. Counting bullets is enough. She used to do this kind of work a lot in the past. When she counted to 13, she had already rushed out of the warehouse like a ghost. The three people on this side immediately turned their guns and began to attack her. However, Azalina is not an ordinary person. These days, she has been eating and living well in Zhonghai's house. She is also nourished by food with spiritual energy, so her current physical condition is much better than when she fought with Zhonghai. Not only did she instantly lower her head to dodge the first round of bullets, but before the second round of bullets came, she had already stepped on the opposite wall. Then, she flipped over and dodged the second round of attacks. Then, she pressed down and dodged the third round of attacks. At this moment, the sound of the firing pin hitting the air was heard. It just happened that there were no more bullets. Seeing this, the corners of Azalina's mouth couldn't help but twitch. The 3 plates in her hand instantly flew out. With 3 slapping sounds, the wrists of the 3 people were hit by Azalina. The huge force caused a sharp pain in the wrists of the 3 people. In an instant, they couldn't hold the guns in their hands and the pistols fell to the ground. At this time, Azalina also flashed and appeared in front of them. She stepped on the ground and jumped high. Then, she directly hit the side of the cheek of the person in the middle, sending him flying to the person on the left. Not only did he fall, but he also pulled the person on the left down. Seeing this scene, the person on the right was stunned for a moment, but he was still ready to fight. But just as he took a step forward, Azalina didn't stop in the air. Instead, she directly stepped on the wall on the other side and bounced back again. At the same time, a whip kick landed heavily on the person's face. In an instant, the person saw stars. He slammed into the wall and fell weakly. Now, only the last person who had just stood up was left. Azalina didn't say much. She turned around and flashed behind the person in an instant. She raised her hands and climbed directly onto the person's neck, not giving him any chance at all. She twisted her body like this. With a click, the person's neck was already tilted to the other side and his body went limp. Although it was lively now, in fact, the exchange of gunfire between the 4 people happened in a flash. From the time Azalina came out of the warehouse to the time the 3 people all fell, it took less than 5 seconds. Aphrodite and the others in the warehouse only heard a burst of noise before the outside quieted down. It's done. They're just some hooligans. After checking the situation of the 3 people again, 2 of them were already dead. The person who was hit first was still breathing, but a severe concussion was inevitable. After shouting at Aphrodite and the others inside, Azalina also took out the guns of the other people, at the same time found the magazines on their bodies and reloaded them. Are there any more enemies? After adjusting the gun to the best state, Azalina looked at Aphrodite and said with a serious face, "Yes, there are more outside, and there are more upstairs." Aphrodite heard her words and said with a serious face, "Don't move." Just as she finished speaking, there was a sound in Azalina's ears. In an instant, she pointed her gun at the stairs, and a long gun stretched out from the stairs. But when the 2 sides saw each other, they were stunned for a moment. Then the long gun in the distance was put away first, revealing Belle Lester's face. Bale and Azalina had met before. In fact, the reason she was sent here was because Bale was the one who sent her away. It's done? Belle looked at the 3 people lying next to Azalina and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Well, it's also done upstairs? Hearing his words, Azalina also put away her gun and asked with a serious face, Well, it's done, but there are still a lot of people outside. If it's convenient, I'll have to trouble you to take care of them. Seeing Aphrodite and the others coming out of the warehouse, Belle put away his gun. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to trust this woman for the time being. When this woman heard what Belle said, she also nodded, indicating that it doesn't matter. By the way, there is still a big guy upstairs. You are a doctor, right? Go and see him, he is with us. Seeing that Azalina had agreed, Belle was about to leave. But before he left, he suddenly remembered something and said to Bernice, who had just walked out with a frightened look on her face. Then, he quickly ran up to the second floor. He wanted to go to the roof and continue attacking. Just now, when he just came down, he just happened to see the final confrontation between the one-eyed man and the big guy. He subconsciously opened fire and killed the one-eyed man who was holding the gun. As for the big guy, after telling him that he was going to save the other girls, he fainted. After all, he had been hit by more than 10 bullets. Although they didn't hit any vital parts, it was still hard to explain why he didn't faint. Oh. Ah. Hearing Belle's words, Bernice froze for a moment before reacting. Indeed, if it wasn't for the big guy just now, they would have died, so when she heard that the big guy was in trouble, she should also do her duty. So she immediately went upstairs and looked at the big guy who had lost too much blood and was in shock. Everyone was also busy. Fortunately, Zhang Hai cherished his life very much. In addition to not being able to perform surgery, he almost had all kinds of medicine, so temporarily stabilizing his condition was not a problem. As long as the people outside were repelled, they could use a helicopter to send him for treatment. And Azalina, at this time, also came to the second floor. This was the first time she observed Zhang Hai's villa, and it was really good. As for Belle on the other side, he quickly climbed to the top of the bed. When he came up, the distance between the two sides was only about 30 meters. Zhang Hai and the others were now hiding behind the car, shooting with pistols and shotguns. And the other side seemed to be very confident in the people who attacked the villa. They only shot back and didn't attack forward. This was a good opportunity. Chapter 4:12. Setting up the gun, reloading and aiming, Bale's movements were done in one go. He had trained himself to be a killing machine in the Delta, and now he was able to use it freely. When he put the crosshairs with night vision goggles on those people, death came. Bang! A person who was attacking Zhang Hai's manor had a look of disbelief on his face as he looked at the bloody hole in his chest. His face was filled with confusion as he went limp. The person beside him was also filled with shock. They were shocked not because one of their companions died, but because the sniper came back. Just now, they clearly heard Zhang Hai ask the sniper to deal with the enemies in the villa. Now that the sniper came back, and the people in the villa were silent, there was no need to say more. The people in the villa were finished. Without backup, they were finished. Thinking of this, these people suddenly felt a chill down their spine. They looked at each other and saw a trace of fear in each other's eyes. Run! No one knew who said it first, but many people gave up the idea of continuing to fight at this time. They were really ready to run, but could they run? With the sound of the sniper rifle again, another person fell in a pool of blood, and this gunshot was like a starting gun, making the others rush in all directions in an instant. These people may be third-rate in fighting, but when it came to running, they were all experts. They knew that now they couldn't run in a straight line, they had to run separately. Maybe 2 of them could escape. The 11 people who were still alive scattered in an instant, running in 11 directions. But just as they ran out of the bunker, the shotguns began to play their role. There was almost no need to aim with the shotguns, they just needed to look at the approximate position and shoot. Among the 11 people, 5 of them were shot to the ground by these shotguns. There were 6 people who escaped quickly, but they were also targeted by Zhang Hai and Bale. Under the heavy fire of the sniper rifle and machine gun, Zhang Hai wiped out 3 people at once, and Bale also killed 1. Only 2 of the 6 people escaped into the grass in the distance, but Zhang Hai was not worried, because there were still their reinforcements there. Sure enough, with a dog's bark, 2 people's screams sounded in the grass. At this point, all the people who attacked Zhang Hai's manor were killed. Looking at the outer wall of his villa, which was full of bullet holes, and his car, Zhang Hai's heart was bleeding. Needless to say, his loss this time was not small, and the most important thing was that he probably had to pay for these losses. These people certainly didn't have the money to pay, and the insurance company couldn't pay for Zhang Hai's injuries. It was precisely because of this that Zhang Hai estimated that this time, he would have to pay a lot of money, but compared to the losses he would suffer if he didn't resist, and the importance of the people in his manor, these were not a problem. Phew. Let's talk about the inventory tomorrow. We need to deal with the guys outside now. With a long sigh, Zhang Hai patted Moses, Adams, who was not far from him. Although Moses, Adams was a man who couldn't carry anything, he was still a man after all, so Zhang Hai originally asked him to hide in the villa. As a result, he deliberately came outside and found a small pistol to fight with him. Although he didn't kill anyone and shot a dozen bullets there, Zhang Hai still appreciated such a person who was willing to go through thick and thin with him. I won't go. Feeling his weak body, Moses, Adams said with a wry smile. Just stay here and be obedient. Looking at him, Zhang Hai smiled and said hello to Belle upstairs. After the two came down, they started the only car that could still move, Zhang Hai's car, and rushed to the airport. After arriving at the airport, Zhang Hai and Belle got on Marin Rupert's helicopter, took off, and headed outside the manor. On the helicopter, Zhang Hai had already set up a fixed machine gun rack. To be honest, after firing nearly 500 bullets, even if Zhang Hai's physical fitness was really strong, some of his muscles were now trembling. The recoil of this thing was too strong. It was so strong that Zhang Hai felt like he couldn't withstand it. As the helicopter flew out of the manor, the police and the bad guys outside were all dumbfounded, especially the bad guys. When Zhang Hai opened the door of the helicopter and revealed the M134, Doyle George, who was hiding behind the police car at this time, couldn't help but laugh. He knew that they would win even without backup. Tut 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 tut. In an instant, the 7.62mm bullets became an eternal sound in this space. The people below didn't expect to be attacked from the sky at all. Even if these people hid in the car, it was useless. The defense on the side of the car couldn't withstand the M134 strafing, let alone the alloy on the roof. As the bullets continued to pour down, these people who originally agreed to fake the fight were completely dumbfounded. They watched as their companions were shot into sieves by the bullets from the helicopter in front of them. Many people wanted to run at this time. But could they run? Don't forget, there was still Belle. As long as these people sat in the driver's seat, Belle would reward the person in the driver's seat with a bullet. As blood flowed, screams sounded one after another in front of Zhang Hai's manor. The Americans were never stubborn people. In the past, when they were fighting, there were people who surrendered in groups. Now it was the same. Seeing that they couldn't win, many people took the initiative to kneel on the ground, put their hands on their heads, and surrendered. Although Zhang Hai really wanted to kill these people, Belle, who was behind him, pulled him back. The law of the United States clearly stated that when the other person didn't threaten or have the will to fight, as long as they killed someone, even if it was in self-defense, it was still murder. There were many police officers here. These people wouldn't say anything, but it didn't mean that these police officers were on the same side as Zhang Hai. Therefore, they would do what they should do, and they couldn't do what they shouldn't do. Of course, after these people went in, whether they could come out alive depended on Zhang Hai's mood. Seeing that the battle was over, Zhang Hai breathed a sigh of relief and returned to his manor by plane. When he returned to the manor, the police in Winthrop had already broken through the roadblocks and arrested most of the people blocking the road. The remaining police cars were sent to the manor. With the addition of these police cars, all the people who had surrendered were taken away. Then the police began to clean up the manor. A total of 46 people invaded Zhang Hai's manor. Of these 46 people, 41 were dead. There were still 5 people alive, including the one who let Delina and the others go. When Zhang Hai saw this big guy, he remembered that this guy should be the big guy he met in Miami. He had even invited him to eat hamburgers before, but he didn't know why this big guy would come here. However, he also listened to Delina's words. If it wasn't for this big guy, they would have been done for. Although Zhang Hai hated these people who invaded his manor, he was not a person who would bite the hand that fed him. This person helped him, so Zhang Hai sent him to the hospital in Boston in his helicopter. Of course, the Boston police also went with him. As for the other 4 people who were still alive, they were not treated so well. After the ambulance arrived, their wounds were simply treated and they were directly taken back to the Winthrop police station. They had no human rights or freedom here. If they didn't die immediately after breaking into someone's house with a gun, then they could only wait and see. There should be a priority for everything. Winthrop and Zhonghai's manor had just been solved. There was also news from Boston. The Boston police immediately dispatched and sealed off the area where Billy Wallen was. They must not let this guy escape. Once there was evidence, they would immediately arrest him. This was inevitable. Zhonghai's house was temporarily uninhabitable. After arranging for everyone to stay in the small villa where Aphrodite and the others lived for a night, Zhonghai also took Moses Adams to the Winthrop police station. Of course, Zhonghai did not lock up Azalina, who had made a great contribution this time. Instead, he let her go with Aphrodite and the others. Zhonghai did not have any restrictions on her. If she wanted to leave now, she could leave. Originally, Zhonghai was in a dilemma whether to lock her up at home or not. Now that she saved Delina and the others' lives, Zhonghai did not need to be in a dilemma. He would just give her back her freedom. However, Azalina did not seem to want to leave. They stayed in the police station for a night. Of course, Zhonghai's treatment was naturally different from those people. After Zhonghai made a simple statement, he was assigned to an office and slept there. Although he only slept on the sofa, he was obviously the most comfortable in the entire police station. Even Moses Adams, who came with him, only slept for 3 hours. He had a lot of things to do. Although he did not help much during the battle, he also proved his position. Therefore, Zhonghai handed over all the work to him, including counting the losses, monitoring the interrogation records, and finding the details of these people. In Boston, since Zhonghai could not solve it with money, he could only find a way to solve it himself. If people did not offend him, he basically would not offend them. But if people offended him, then he would kill their whole family. Don't say that the children were innocent, the women were innocent, and their parents were innocent. In Zhonghai's view, it was normal for his whole family to be buried with him when he committed a crime. Especially when it was him who was the one who offended him. Although he was mentally prepared, when Moses Adams sent the information the next day, he could not help but frown. Chapter 4:13. The exterior walls of the villa need to be cleaned up, the parking lot needs to be cleaned up, the lawn needs to be cleaned up, and all the cars need to be repaired. 6 of them are scrapped, Philemon Turner's cars. The windows in the house are broken, the lawn is seriously polluted, and a lot of the barbed wire on the exterior walls have been knocked down. Everything in the rooms has been destroyed. Zhonghai couldn't help but slap his forehead. Last night, he had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation. No, if the villa was renovated, it might cost millions of dollars. This was pure compensation, and the insurance company wouldn't pay for it. Generally speaking, the insurance company would only pay for the villa if it caught fire, was stolen, or exploded. Even if a meteorite fell from the sky and smashed the villa, the insurance company would still pay for it, because it was a natural disaster. But the insurance company wouldn't pay for the villa that was attacked and beaten up like this, because Zhonghai had caught the people who attacked his manor. Logically speaking, these people should pay for it. But it was obvious that these people would pay for it. After all, after they went in, Zhonghai wouldn't let them come out alive. Besides, they didn't have the money to pay for it. Zhonghai couldn't do anything about it except scold them. Of course, he probably wouldn't be insured again next year, because of these fraudulent foreign insurance companies. The only money that could be paid for was the repair of Zhonghai's cars, because the cars had gun insurance. There was nothing else. Zhonghai had to pay for it himself. Also, they had fought together last night. Zhonghai was very touched. He gave each of them $200,000, which had been given before the battle. It could be considered a settlement allowance. If anything happened, he would naturally give them more money. But now that nobody was hurt, Zhonghai could save the rest of the money. Zhonghai didn't care about the money. He could earn millions of dollars back by killing dozens of cows. But he was really angry. Why did he have to suffer such an unexpected disaster? Millions of dollars were nothing to him. These guys attacked his manor. Who did he offend? Have you investigated these guys? I'm going to kill them all. Sitting on the sofa in the police station, Zhonghai said to Moses Adams. Listening to Zhonghai's words and looking at his sharp eyes, Moses Adams shrugged. Needless to say, there are many people who want to kill them all, but unfortunately, this guy is very careful. This time, other than the core members and desperados, No one received his call personally. All the gangsters who were caught were interrogated by the Winthrop and Boston police. They all came with the corps members, and most of these corps members died in your hands. Only 4 survived, and they are the only people who might know the situation, but these 4 people didn't say anything. Moses Adams hesitated for a moment as he looked at Zhang Hai. The current situation is indeed a little troublesome. After all, in this world there was law everywhere. Now that someone was prepared to fight to the death, the police couldn't do anything about it. Give me their information. I'll take a look. But this didn't apply to Zhang Hai. He didn't play by the rules. If the other party didn't play by the rules, he wouldn't play by the rules. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams immediately found the information of the 4 people and handed it to Zhang Hai. With the information of the 4 people, Zhang Hai pushed open the door and walked out. Last night, the Winthrop police station was very impressive. Especially Doyle George and the others, who were on the front line and didn't take a step back. As a result, 3 police officers were injured. Fortunately, no one died, which was a great fortune amidst the misfortune. So after taking the statements last night, Zhang Hai donated $3 million to the police station. He donated $50,000 to each of the 3 injured police officers. Of course, it wasn't through the accounts, which meant that the $50,000 could be directly stuffed into their pockets without paying taxes. It was because of the $3,150,000 that everyone in the police station now looked at Zhang Hai more warmly than they did at Murray Smith. Many people were wondering why they weren't the ones who were injured back then. $50,000. Only a middle-class family in the United States could earn $50,000. Although the police's salary wasn't low, it wasn't high either. They got more than a year's salary for no reason, and they didn't have to pay taxes. Just thinking about it made them very happy. Faced with this god of wealth, Zhang Hai, they were now truly loyal. When they saw Zhang Hai come out, they all looked at Zhang Hai kindly and nodded with smiles. After Zhang Hai nodded back at them, he walked into the interrogation room. At that moment, it was already the 3rd wave of police officers interrogating these people in the interrogation room. Because all the peaceful countries in the world were basically the same, the interrogation had to be videotaped, so there was no way to beat people up or torture them to get a confession. The only way was to bombard them with fatigue, not letting them sleep at all, and then keep asking simple questions. If they didn't answer, they could wake them up with water, but they wouldn't let them sleep. These people were all felons with evidence. Firstly, they definitely wouldn't be allowed to be released on bail. Secondly, there was no humane law. They could be locked up here for 15 days. If you had the ability, you could go without sleep for 15 days. People definitely couldn't take it. However, Zhang Hai couldn't stand waiting here for 15 days. Therefore, after he greeted Murray Smith, who was watching over here, he walked into one of the interrogation rooms. When the police officer in the interrogation room saw Zhang Hai, he stood up. Although he was still very respectful to Zhang Hai, there was some surprise in his eyes. This was because he thought that Zhang Hai was here to beat people up. If that was the case, it would be difficult for them. If a criminal died in the police station, regardless of whether the criminal had committed a heinous crime, it would definitely cause a storm in the United States, where human life was more important than the sky. Therefore, he was really afraid that Zhang Hai would make a move. However, Zhang Hai wasn't a brainless person. He knew that he couldn't make a move in the police station. Even if he had a close relationship with the police station, he couldn't. Therefore, from the beginning, he didn't plan to make a move. Standing in front of the table, Zhang Hai glanced at the man in front of him. This man was one of the 46 people who attacked Zhang Hai's house yesterday. He was also the one with the least injury. This man was hit by Azalina Vicabrio and knocked into his companion. He had a severe concussion, but it wasn't fatal. Other than that, there were almost no internal injuries on his body. A concussion was actually a very disgusting injury. If it was mild, it would be nausea and confusion, just like cervical spondylosis. If it was severe, in addition to nausea and confusion, there would also be severe head pain. However, this guy was also a tough guy. He endured the headache and sat there for so long. Although his face was pale, he didn't say a word. Glancing at the 2 policemen, Zhang Hai motioned for them to leave first. After hesitating for a while, the 2 also left. After they left, Zhang Hai sat in front of the man. Moses Adams cleverly came to the front of the camera. Although the picture was still on, he pressed the microphone. The recording continued, but no sound could be heard. Your name is Camilla March? Looking at the information in his hand, Zhang Hai said calmly. However, when the other party heard Zhang Hai's words, he didn't answer him. He was still sitting there indifferently, motionless, not speaking. Oh, you don't have to answer. I just came over to talk to you. You attacked my house, and you know that I'm very rich. So, 15 days later, no matter what sentence you will be sentenced to, it will be better if it's the death penalty, but if you go to prison, you will die a much more painful death. Of course, I know that you should be prepared for this. But according to my information, you also have a mother, 2 sons, and a daughter. TSK. What do you mean? Hearing Zhang Hai's threat, the man named Camilla March didn't waver. He knew that he couldn't escape death. A guy like Zhang Hai is obviously not a good person. He will certainly not let them go. But when Zhang Hai talked about his family, the man panicked. You attacked my manor and attacked my family. So, I'm going to kill your whole family. Looking at Camilla March in front of him, Zhang Hai said indifferently, as if he was just saying that he drank a glass of milk this morning. You can't do this, they are innocent. Hearing that Zhang Hai is really going to kill his whole family, Camilla March instantly slammed his hands on the table and said with a horrified face. Although Americans have a very weak concept of family, people like him can't keep their wives. They are constantly changing, but their blood-related family is their spiritual support. Now, Zhang Hai casually said that he will kill his family. He knows that Zhang Hai is not threatening him, nor is he joking. He will really do it. The law of the United States can't judge a demon like him. Innocent? Don't say this word in front of me. When you attacked me, wasn't I innocent? Weren't the people in my manor innocent? I can only say that you are in a hurry. Attacking me, I will kill your whole family. It's very fair. Clasping his hands, Zhang Hai said very indifferently. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but be speechless because he really didn't know what to say. Ask me, I'll tell you what I want to know. Please let them go. He knows that if he wants his family to survive now, his life alone is not enough. He must say something. No, I'm not a police officer. I know your boss is Billy Wallen. I'll find him personally and kill his entire family. I'm here to tell you that I'll kill your entire family too. That's all. Gently knocking on the table, Zhang Hai said very indifferently. Then he stood up and shook his head at Moses Adams. The two walked out of the interrogation room. Chapter 4:14. No, you can't do this. I'll tell you whatever you want to ask. Please, please. They are innocent, please come back. I'll tell you whatever you want to ask. Please don't do anything to them. Police, come and ask me. I'll tell you everything. Please protect my family, please. Looking at Zhang Hai's firm and determined steps, the man named Camilla March struggled to stand up and stop Zhang Hai, but unfortunately, his hands and feet were handcuffed to the fixed chair, and it was difficult to move, let alone stand up. Although his hands and feet were bruised, he continued to shout as if he felt nothing. Seeing that his request could not move Zhang Hai's heart of stone, he called the police. For him, the only person he could trust now was the police, his former biggest enemy. Zhang, your trick is really useful, Moses Adams said with a chuckle as he closed the door of the interrogation room again. The wicked will be punished by the wicked. Zhang Hai's, I'll kill your whole family, was really a heavy blow, and it was really useful. You think I'm joking? No, I'm serious. But listening to Moses Adams's words, Zhang Hai laughed at himself. He would not joke about such things. Then he walked into the other 3 interrogation rooms. Except for one stubborn person who still did not say a word, the other 2 people were at a loss, shouting for Zhang Hai to let them go, but unfortunately, Zhang Hai was really going to kill their whole families. The people outside who accompanied the attack and blocked the road all deserved to die. But Zhang Hai had no way to kill their whole families. And Zhang Hai would not let these people go, because he also wanted to show his existence. He was not to be trifled with. But how to deal with these people? Zhang Hai had some problems. With so many people, it was impossible for him to deal with them one by one. It was too troublesome, and he could not fly to Miami and spend money to find some people to come back to Boston to do these things. Not to mention whether it would make a big deal out of it, Just going back and forth was very troublesome, so Zhang Hai was also a little hesitant. After coming out of the 4 interrogation rooms, the police took over their work again. This time, their work efficiency was really fast. Soon, they found out the specific situation. Their boss was Billy Wallen, and it was also Billy who ordered the attack on Zhang Hai. In addition, Billy Wallen was also involved in gambling, flour, and other businesses. In order to protect their families, these people told him everything, which made the police very happy. Then, the police in Winthrop called the police in Boston. After the police in Boston received the news, they went out to arrest Billy Wallen, but the guy had already escaped. Then, they sealed all his property and warehouses, and some of his shops, and seized a lot of flour and other things. Of course, these had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. He was still thinking about how to kill these people's whole families. After Zhang Hai finished his work at the police station, he took a taxi and returned to the manor with Moses Adams. After returning to the manor, Moses Adams went to help Zhang Hai solve some trivial matters. For example, the renovation of the manor, the maintenance of the vehicles, and so on. Zhang Hai returned to his villa, sat on the sofa in the empty living room, and sorted out his thoughts. Now, his villa was empty because of last night. Daliana and Marion lived in Aphrodite's room, and Bernice and Lilia lived in Hilda Leonard and Peggy Hall's small villa. Of course, this was only temporary. When the villa was repaired, they would come back to live there. But these days, Zhang Hai still has no place to stay. Last night, he stayed in the police station, and he didn't know where to stay tonight. Although Zhang Hai's villa, except for the outer wall in his own room, was seriously damaged, other places were fine. Especially the guest rooms, the damage could be said to be almost zero. But now, this villa was the crime scene of the police. Even if they didn't feel guilty, the guest rooms were not allowed to stay, so this was also a problem. Headache, what should I do? Rubbing his temples, Zhang Hai seemed to have not felt like this for a long time. Since he came here, his life has been very leisurely. Every day, in addition to eating, playing, or sleeping. Except for the fact that he didn't have a fixed girlfriend, he felt that his life was as beautiful as living in a dream. Now that he suddenly had so many things to do, he really felt that he couldn't handle it well. Not to mention the problem of sleeping, just the matter of revenge gave him a headache. If he didn't take revenge, the anger in Zhang Hai's heart would not be extinguished. But if he wanted to take revenge, how could he do it? Do it himself? What if he failed miserably? But if he spent money to find someone, there was no reliable person in Boston. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai really had a headache. Even if he wanted to trouble Belle, Zhang Hai couldn't say it. After all, the people he wanted to kill were not only Billy Wallen, but also the old, the weak, the women, and the children. Belle Lester was a soldier, and he had a strong sense of justice. He definitely wouldn't do it. Zhang Hai didn't have to try. If he tried, it would be easy to distract him. Other than that, he had no other choice. What's wrong? Are you thinking about something? Just when Zhang Hai felt a little numb, a voice suddenly came from behind. This startled Zhang Hai. He immediately looked back and saw Azalina Vicabrio standing behind him. It's you. You haven't left yet? Thank you so much for last night. Seeing that it was her, Zhang Hai's body relaxed again. He continued to lean on the sofa, talking intermittently. You don't have to thank me. I was just saving myself. Besides, if I leave, it seems that I have nowhere to go. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina moved her long legs, slowly walked to the sofa next to Zhang Hai, and then sat down. The world is big. There will always be a place for you. Zhang Hai also knew some of her situation. Now, what else could he say? He could only comfort her. But then again, with her skills, it wouldn't be a problem for her to make a living anywhere. But I don't like to go out. Otherwise, what do you think of me? Shaking her head, Azalina suddenly looked at Zhang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was still a little confused. What does she mean? I know that you have been very troubled recently, and you also need a timely combat force. What do you think of me? It's not that I want to say this, but although I can't beat you in a fight, when it comes to close combat, your special forces subordinate is no match for me either. Looking at Zhang Hai, Azalina suddenly said. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was confused. What is going on? In fact, People are very afraid of the unknown, and Azalina is the same. People live according to their habits. If it weren't for the fact that she would die if she didn't escape, she would probably still be in the original organization now. After escaping here, she stayed with Zhang Hai. To be honest, although she was locked in the warehouse, she felt very good. Here, there were no endless missions, no bloodthirsty lives, and no threats that could take your life at any time. There was also no need to scheme against others. There was good food, good drink, and a leisurely life, even though it didn't last long. But it had already made her a little fascinated. Now, if she went out to find a job, it would be better to stay with Zhang Hai. It was safe and leisurely, and most importantly, she believed that Zhang Hai must have a lot of things that he wanted her to help with. When I was 6 years old, I entered the KGB and began to learn fighting skills and firearms skills. When I was 12 years old, I completed my first mission independently. When I was 14, I began to learn the ability of spy missions. I know a lot of tricks to please men. Although I haven't used them in actual combat, if you are willing to let me stay, these things are all yours. Seeing the look of desire in Zhang Hai's eyes, Azalina smiled and took the initiative to come closer. However, as soon as she came closer, Zhang Hai was startled, and his body involuntarily shrank back. What are you afraid of? It's not like you can't beat me. Seeing Zhang Hai's appearance, Azalina chuckled, and then her whole body took the initiative to come closer. She had been educated differently from ordinary people since she was a child. In her world, her body was a weapon, her body was a tool, her body was a prop. Her body was a media to complete the task, that's all. Now that she gave it to Zhang Hai, she didn't care, but Zhang Hai couldn't stand it. Although he could casually find some girls to play with outside, if Azalina really stayed, she would be one of his people. Although he was not born in the year of the rabbit, he had the nerves of a rabbit. First, he was timid, and second, he didn't eat the grass around him. Cough, forget it. If you want to stay, then stay. There's no need to try. Sure enough, at the critical moment, Zhang Hai was scared again, and he coughed and said. In fact, he was right to think so. Azalina's strength was indeed strong, and he also needed a bodyguard now. A beautiful female bodyguard with a good figure by his side was also a very honorable thing for him. In that case, thank you, boss. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina also narrowed her eyes and smiled. She suddenly realized that this man who had defeated her seemed to be quite interesting. Originally, she thought that a man like Zhang Hai had no weaknesses, but now it seemed that the weakness was very obvious. You will be free in the future, but when I have to go out for something, you can follow me. You can arrange your time yourself. I will help you solve the problem of your identity. The weekly salary will be set at $2,000, and the year-end bonus will be calculated separately. Zhang Hai also looked for a bodyguard before, so he still had some understanding of the salary of a bodyguard. Chapter 4:15. Being a bodyguard could be considered the job with the least clear price tag in the world. The lowest was a few $1,000s a month, while the highest was $1 million a year. There was no clear price tag. However, Zhang Hai had thought about the problem of hiring bodyguards before, so he went to inquire about it. Nowadays, the top bodyguards in the country had an annual salary of almost $1 million. $2 million or $3 million would be his. And overseas, take Blackwater as an example. Different grades led to different prices. The lowest grade was a C-grade bodyguard, which meant that he had just come out of the Dolphin Special Forces or the Triangle State. Anyone who had undergone basic training would know that Blackwater was made up of 9 parts. Blackwater Training Facility, Blackwater Target System, Blackwater Safety Consulting Company, Blackwater Dog Training Company, Blackwater Airship Company, Blackwater Armored Vehicle Company, Blackwater Maritime Company, Crow Development Group, Blackwater Airborne Division. Different types of training naturally led to different companies. The C-grade bodyguards had just come out of these training companies. Generally, such bodyguards would have an annual salary of about $50,000, but as long as they completed their tasks well, they could be promoted to B-grade. B-grade bodyguards could earn an average of $80,000 a year. Above them were A-grade bodyguards, which were basically the best bodyguards that could be hired, with an annual salary of about $150,000. Above A-grade were S-grade bodyguards, but there were only a few of them. They weren't bounty hunters. These S-grade bodyguards had been hired by the White House or some rich people for a long time, so their prices were naturally different. Zhang Hai's starting salary for Azalina was $100,000. There were a total of 52 weeks in a year, and $2,000 a week. That was more than $100,000 a year, not including the bonus. Including the year-end bonus, it was probably comparable to that of an A-grade bodyguard. Azalina was very satisfied with this annual salary. Of course, she didn't really care about the money. Compared to the money, she was more interested in the identity Zhang Hai gave her and the benefits of living with Zhang Hai. For her, this was the most important thing. Since it had been decided, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. He directly called Mayor Wallace and solved the household registration problem for Azalina. Azalina used to be a blank piece of paper. If she wanted to apply for immigration, it might be a little troublesome. However, Zhang Hai didn't want her to emigrate. It was just an employment contract, which was much simpler. Soon, Mayor Wallace had finalized with Zhang Hai. Azalina was now a Panamanian working in the United States. In this way, the problem of household registration could be easily solved. After solving the biggest household registration problem, Azalina suddenly jumped into Zhang Hai's arms and gave Zhang Hai a kiss. Feeling the softness on his lips, Zhang Hai was stunned. "That's great, boss. I'm yours from now on." Looking at the somewhat stunned Zhang Hai, Azalina said with a smile. Okay, I will leave my safety to you in the future." Looking at the enthusiastic Azalina in front of him, Zhang Hai also said a little woodenly. Looking at him, Azalina chuckled and stood up from the sofa. Looking at Zhang Hai, Azalina smiled, then winked at Zhang Hai and said, "Since I am now the boss's person, I will help the boss solve his trouble." "Trouble? What trouble?" Hearing her words, Zhang Hai's heart thumped, and then his originally somewhat woodenly face became serious in an instant. It seems that this woman is not as silly and sweet as others. She seems to have no desire, but in fact, this woman is not someone to be trifled with. "You understand. This is my proof of allegiance. Don't worry, I will not let you down." Looking at Zhang Hai's serious look, Azalina also smiled, and deliberately patted the pistol tied to her leg that she snatched from those people yesterday, and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. "Is she really reliable? Forget it, I will take care of these things. You just stay here obediently." Shaking his head, Zhang Hai still rejected her proposal, but Azalina smiled and waved at Zhang Hai. After saying, "See you tomorrow," she left Zhang Hai's villa. When Zhang Hai stood up and wanted to stop her, she had already run away. Looking at her back, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. At this time, Zhang Hai didn't know what he was thinking. Although he wanted to stop her, he did have such an idea. Because even Zhang Hai didn't have the confidence to retreat under the threat of bullets, he didn't want her to die. But then again, if she can really help me solve the problem. So Zhang Hai was really in a dilemma. Just as he was in a dilemma, Azalina had already left his manor. "I hope this matter can be settled. I came here to farm and raise fish. Why are there always so many old things?" Seeing that Azalina had left, Zhang Hai also sighed helplessly. To be honest, in addition to the initial anger, Zhang Hai, who had calmed down now, really had a headache because he wasn't a person who liked to fight and kill. He didn't have much ambition for things like power and status, but these people who touched his bottom line, Zhang Hai wouldn't easily let them go. He just hoped that this time, he would make an example of them, and no one would dare to show off next time. But it was estimated that his hope would be difficult to achieve. In this world, there would always be people who wanted to take a bite of fat meat. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai sighed and went to the residential area of Aphrodite and the others. He was too anxious yesterday. Today, he had to comfort these girls, especially Bernice and little Ya. Originally, Zhang Hai thought that these two would leave on the same day when they heard that Zhang Hai's manor was going to be attacked, but he didn't expect that these two didn't leave. Although they were almost scared to tears last night, they still held on strongly. Today, Zhang Hai had to go and see them. Of course, in addition to them, Zhang Hai also had to comfort Delina, Marian, and Aphrodite. When Zhang Hai appeared, these girls who seemed to be quite persistent couldn't help but cry. Even Bernice, who was usually cold and cheerless, was the same. Last night, she was really afraid that she would die like this. But fortunately, under the circumstances, nothing happened to her. But now that she saw Zhang Hai, she still felt wronged, and her tears flowed down. Besides her, the other girls were fine, especially little Ya, who was hiding in a dark room. When she saw Zhang Hai come in, she just hugged Zhang Hai. She didn't cry nor did she say anything. It can be seen that after many years of illness, she had become indifferent to life and death. It was inevitable that she would feel uncomfortable in her heart, but it was still within the scope of her endurance. Delina and the others were also very afraid of death, but they believed that Zhang Hai would come to save them, so they were fine. This time, it could be considered as surviving a disaster. After Zhang Hai comforted them, he specially organized a small party in Aphrodite's small villa. Of course, only Zhang Hai, Delina, Marian, Bernice, Little Ya, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Ohilia, Bridget, and Janice, a total of 15 people. It was indeed a bit crowded here. But they really needed to relax. Just as Zhang Hai and others were discussing surviving a disaster in the manor, Azalina had already gone to Boston, not far from Zhang Hai's manor. After she arrived there, she deliberately parked her car in the parking lot of the North Shore Garden Arena. Although there was no basketball game here today, there was no ice hockey game here. The North Shore Garden Arena was the home of 2 teams. In addition to the familiar Celtics, there was also the Boston Bruins, a team in the National Hockey League. Ice hockey, like basketball, began in November every year and ended in April of the next year. After the end of April, only the teams that entered the playoffs could play. This year's Bruins had no chance to enter the playoffs, but the Celtics had entered. But unfortunately, they lost to the popular Knights in the end. Now the Knights and Warriors were competing for the championship, and this place was empty. But although there was no game here, there would still be some tourists and people playing nearby who would come in to take a look. Azalina was the same. She took the money Zhang Hai gave her and specially bought a Celtics uniform. After stuffing some newspapers in it to change her body shape, she left from another door and took a taxi to the South District of Boston. Although nothing would happen to her even if she was seen, after all, she was Zhang Hai's employee. But years of experience made her do this. Indeed, if it came to these things, Belle was far from her opponent. When Zhang Hai and others were preparing dinner at home, gunshots were heard in the South District of Boston. But everyone didn't care too much about the gunshots. After all, where was this? The South District of Boston was a chaotic place. When someone found that someone had died, they began to call the police, but the murderer had already disappeared. On the same day, the 4 felons who were still detained in the Winthrop police station received the news that their family members were shot by unknown people. These people almost cried on the spot and swore to God that Zhang Hai did it. But the person in charge of monitoring Zhang Hai's manor said that except for Moses Adams, no one in Zhang Hai's manor had moved this year. The police didn't know about Azalina's existence. Unknowingly, Zhang Hai's villa came to an end, and he decided to stay at Belle's for the night. Belle also had 2 rooms, so it was naturally not a problem for Zhang Hai to stay there. When Zhang Hai, who was lying in bed, received a text message from Azalina, Zhang Hai smiled. Because there was a number 1 on it, Zhang Hai knew that there was only one goal left. Chapter 4:16. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. A flurry of footsteps sounded. In a small alley in Boston's South City, a group of people was running fast. The leader accidentally knocked over a trash can, and the people behind him fell down. When these people were covered with garbage and smelly water, these people didn't care. After rolling and crawling from the ground, they quickly ran to a corner next to them and looked behind them in horror. Boss, I can't run anymore, what should I do now? Looking at the person in the lead, a young man next to him was already tearing up. With a sobbing tone, he said to the first person who fell down just now with a pained expression. You ask me what to do? How do I know what to do, sure? Keep your voice down, don't attract that female devil. Patting the boy's head, the first person who fell couldn't help but say sharply. If there was someone familiar with Billy Wallen here at this time, they may not recognize him. The person who spoke was not someone else, but Billy Wallen, who had a grudge against Zhang Hai. Now he was in a mess, which was completely different from the high-spirited person he was a few days ago. He now understood why the United States was said to be a paradise for the rich, because they really couldn't deal with the rich here. Originally, He thought that with thousands of underlings, he was invincible. As long as he didn't attack the United States government, he could beat up whoever he wanted. But obviously he thought too much. In the United States, you, a gang leader, want to find trouble with the rich? You are crazy. That night, the revenge came. According to his informant, the backbones and underlings he sent last night were all arrested. The backbones were almost all dead, all the underlings were arrested, and the Boston police also began to seal the block he was in last night and began to seal the bars, casinos, and the like he was responsible for, which made him feel bad. When he wanted to run, he found that all the blocks he was in were sealed, which made him feel even worse. He immediately changed his clothes and used the complicated alleys in Boston's South District to escape. Less than half an hour later, the police broke down the door because his underlings confessed, and then he was scared out of his wits. The entire Southern District was completely sealed off. Whether it was entry or exit, everything was under strict inspection. In every street and alley, the first thing that came out of everyone's mouth when they met was whether they had seen Billy. This scared Billy Wallen out of his wits. He never would have thought that he would end up with no path to heaven and no door to hell just because of his little act. Originally, he thought that no matter how ruthless he was, he would still have a chance to escape like his former boss. But now, not to mention running away, he didn't even have the chance to get on a boat. He was sealed in the South City and couldn't get out at all. It seemed that the police would not give up until they caught him this time. Just as he was hiding like a mouse, preparing to endure for a period of time to see if there was a chance to leave, a woman entered South City. This woman was really strong. She actually found 5 of his hiding places in a row, and her methods were extremely ruthless. None of his underlings were left alive. Everyone who saw her was dead. Now, only the few of them were left. There was only one of them was his assistant, and a few of the kids who had just joined them. Now, these children were about to cry. They only saw the glory of these people before, but they didn't think about the danger they were in. Now that they knew the danger, it was too late. My foundation is gone, just like that. He recalled that a day ago, he was still a rich man who had thousands of underlings and could leave at least a few $1 million every month. How did he lose everything in just one day? His money was gone, and his life was probably going to be gone soon. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile. Life was short, and it was hard to say when it would be good and when it would be bad. Life was counted with one's fingers, and it was in the blink of an eye. Boss, it seems that we were cheated by those Xueqi people. This isn't a good deal. It's a life-threatening deal. Looking at Billy Wallen, his deputy said with a ruthless face. He had a lot of trust in Billy Wallen because he was the one who helped Billy Wallen get his position as the boss. So at this time, he didn't blame his boss for provoking Zhang Hai. He only hated those people who led them to deal with Zhang Hai. They didn't think that if they didn't deal with Zhang Hai, where would they get the chance to develop? Xueqi people, yes, it's all because of those guys. Maybe this information can be exchanged for our lives. When he heard his subordinate's words, Billy Wallen's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said excitedly to his subordinate. Indeed, Zhang Hai only knew that he was dealing with him, but he probably didn't know that there were people behind him. Thinking of this, Billy Wallen couldn't help but get excited. Nothing was more exciting than grasping at straws. But just as he thought of this, a gunshot suddenly came from behind him. The deputy who was helping him analyze the situation just now looked in front of him with an incredulous expression, then fell into the dirty water on the ground. Wow, why didn't you run away? You made me kill another person. Looking at Billy Wallen and the others in front of her, a playful female voice came from the darkness, followed by Azalina's delicate figure slowly walking out of the darkness. At this time, Azalina's hair was scattered, and she was wearing a green Celtic uniform. But at this time, the uniform was covered with bloodstains. These bloodstains were not hers, but the bloodstains of the people she killed. The training she received from novels allowed her to kill people without any burden at all. Whether it was the elderly, children, women, or even pregnant women, she would never hesitate to kill them. Not to mention Billy Wallen and the others. If Zhang Hai killed someone in this situation, he would probably have nightmares for many days, plus vomiting and diarrhea. It would take some time for him to get over it. As for Bell, although he was stronger than Zhang Hai, at least he did not have any psychological burden when killing Billy Wallen and the others, but he could not kill some innocent people. On the contrary, Azalina Vicarborio, a woman who had been killing people since she was 12 years old, did not escape from her original organization because she was tired of killing people like Belle. She escaped because she wanted to live. Of course, boredom was also one of the reasons. That was why she escaped. For her, as long as she completed the task, she did not care who she killed and how many she killed. Demon! Seeing Azalina coming out, the eyes of Billy Wallen and the others unconsciously widened. At this time in their eyes, this female demon was simply the most abominable creature in the world. Thank you for the compliment. Who's next? But unfortunately, their words did not make Azalina angry. She did not even have the slightest emotional fluctuation. She just stood there with a smile and mercilessly shot the head of the boy who was crying just now. She then glanced at the others. Wait, you can't kill me. Are you one of Zhang Hai's people? I have something that Zhang Hai wants to know. Seeing that the woman in front of him was looking at him, Billy Wallen yelled in horror like a frightened cat. He then stretched out his hand and gestured for Azalina to wait for a while, and then said quickly, "Don't worry. Sorry, I'm just responsible for killing people. The exchange of information has nothing to do with me." Hearing his words, Azalina shrugged and said to Billy Wallen with a helpless look, then raised her gun again. Wait a minute. Zhang Hai definitely wants to know this information. I'm not the one who wants to deal with him. I'm just a tool in the hands of others. His real enemy is not me, do you understand? Looking at Azalina in front of him, Billy Wallen said anxiously. Sure enough, when she heard that there was someone behind her, Azalina was stunned. In fact, not only Azalina, but Zhang Hai, Moses Adams, and even Murray Smith were also very curious. No matter how arrogant he was, how could a grey boss dare to provoke a rich man like Zhang Hai? Regardless of whether others believed it or not, they did not believe that Billy Wallen could achieve such a scale in half a year, which meant that he was definitely not a fool. However, he did blatantly attack Zhang Hai's manor, and Zhang Hai didn't know how he was going to end it. But as far as the current situation was concerned, he didn't have the ability to end it. At least, he didn't consider that the police would stand on Zhang Hai's side so firmly. He also didn't consider that Zhang Hai's firepower would be so strong that he could kill 46 of his men. Oh no, 45 of them. There was also a big guy who betrayed him. No one knew what happened. But in any case, it had happened, so he had to pay for what he did. It was that simple. After hearing his words, Azalina hesitated for a moment, but only for a moment. Then, the pistol in her hand flashed continuously. When Billy Wallen thought he was dead, he heard a few gunshots, but he didn't feel any pain. When he opened his eyes again, he found that except for himself, all his men were dead. Since you want to sell information, then you have to see if your information is valuable in my master's eyes. Let's go. Azalina walked to Billy Wallen's side and pointed the gun at his hand. At the same time, she took out a mobile phone with her other hand. This was given to her by Zhang Hai when she left. She pressed the only number on the phone and sent a message to Zhang Hai. After a while, she received a reply. Chapter 4:17. Wah wah. The sound of waves hitting the side of the boat and the shore could be heard. On the endless sea, a small boat was constantly rolling along with the waves. At this time, two people were sitting on the boat. One of them was none other than Azalina Vicobrio, and the other was Billy Wallen. But at this time, Billy Wallen was as embarrassed as he could be. This guy was now covered with wounds all over his body. His face was blue and purple, and his right little finger was missing. It was wrapped with a piece of gauze that didn't look very clean. His two thumbs were tightly tied together by a plastic band used by people who usually assemble computers. His thumb was already purple from necrosis, but he didn't care, and the person opposite him didn't care either. I don't understand. Why are you working for a yellow-skinned monkey? As long as you are willing to let me go, I can get you as much money as you want. Looking at Azalina Vicobrio, who was enjoying the sea breeze in front of him, Billy Wallen said with a serious look. Hearing his words, Azalina chuckled softly. She didn't care about this guy's provocative words. After glancing at the man with her beautiful eyes, she looked into the distance. Looking at her appearance, Billy Wallen couldn't help but sigh. It seems that he thought too little. Billy Wallen was caught last night, and he had been in the hands of this woman for a day and a half of the night. Of course, he had been tortured for the past 24 hours. When he said that he was not behind the scenes, Azalina immediately reported it to Zhang Hai. But then she didn't stop, she continued to beat him. In her opinion, if she can get information out of him, then she doesn't need to trouble Zhang Hai too much. She can deal with it. But the problem now is that this man knows very well that if he doesn't see Zhang Hai, then he will really die, so even if his little finger was cut off, he didn't say a word. Azalina persisted until this afternoon. Seeing that he really didn't want to say anything, she reported it to Zhang Hai. Secondly, Zhang Hai asked her to buy a boat and drive it to his sea area at night to meet him here. Time passed by minute by minute. At about 11 o'clock in the evening, the sound of an engine suddenly sounded in this silent world. Hearing this sound, Azalina stood up first and looked into the distance. Then he saw Zhang Hai driving a boat from his manor. According to the signal, after shaking the headlights, he slowly approached. With the help of the moonlight, he also saw the person on the boat in front of him. Is he still not going to say it? Azalina stood up. Zhang Hai asked her. He's so stubborn. Squinting her eyes, Azalina said with a smile on her face, but from her smile, it could be seen that she was not very satisfied with her approach. She was the first one to do a mission, and she didn't even complete it 100%. It was indeed a bit unsightly, but looking at Zhang Hai's expression, she could tell that he was quite satisfied with the completion of this mission. Well, don't worry about it. Patting Azalina on the shoulder, Zhang Hai walked to the boat, squatted down, and looked at Billy Wallen in front of him. Zhang Hai looked at him carefully. It's this guy who almost forced me into a desperate situation twice in a row. Hello, my name is Zhang Hai. If you have something to say, just say it. At this time, looking at this embarrassed guy, Zhang Hai's anger subsided a little. At least he can talk to him quietly. Looking at the white man in front of him, Zhang Hai said indifferently, If I say it, can you save my life? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Billy Wallen raised his head and said with a firm look on his face, If I'm interested in what you say, I promise not to kill you. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai smiled, but it doesn't matter. Zhang Hai spread his hands and said calmly to Billy Wallen, Don't just talk about you, there's also her. At this time, Billy Warren could only believe in Zhang Hai's oath. However, he was still careful enough. He looked at Azalina behind Zhang Hai and said those words. Even if Zhang Hai fell out with him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. She won't either, just say it. Glancing at Azalina behind him, Zhang Hai said calmly, I hope you'll keep your promise. It wasn't my intention to cause trouble for you. No matter how stupid I am, I wouldn't cause trouble for a rich man like you. The reason why I've been keeping an eye on you is because the person behind me wants to cause trouble for you. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, Billy Wallen took himself out of the conversation. He really knows how to talk. That's not what I want to hear. Who is the person behind you? Glancing at Billy Wallen indifferently, Zhang Hai said impatiently. He didn't come to listen to Billy Wallen's story. If he talks nonsense again, he will kill him. I don't know who it is, but the person who contacted me is a group of Xueqi people. They call the boss behind them Young Master. They are very rich, and they should have some power in Xueqi. Originally, they just wanted your life, but then they wanted your cow. Seeing the impatience in Zhang Hai's eyes, Billy Wallen said anxiously, Xueqi people? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but frown. What's going on? Yes, Xueqi people. I'm very sure. Before I came to Boston, I hung out with the Chinese Grey Gang in New York for a while. Although their accent is a little different, most of them are similar. They don't know that I can understand Chinese, and they called in front of me. They called the person on the other side of the phone as Young Master. Their Young Master seems to live in the capital. Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Billy Wallen said everything he could to save his life. His face was filled with nervousness. It was very scary. Did they say what their boss was called, and what the boss of that group was called? Looking at Billy Wallen in front of him, Zhang Hai said seriously. To be honest, when he heard what he said, the first enemy he thought of was Qin Fan's father, Qin Tai-en. But if it was this guy, the timing didn't seem to match. After all, it was really a long time ago when Billy Wallen first attacked him. At that time, he didn't know Qin Fan. Moreover, after Qin Fan died, Qin Tai-en followed him not long after. They didn't have the time to commit the crime. Since it was not the Qin family, to be honest, Zhang Hai really didn't know if he had any enemies in China who wanted to kill him. I don't know who their boss is. I only know that they call their boss Young Master. As for the name of that group of people, I only know the leader. When we first met, he said that his name was Rui Jiang. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Billy Wallen immediately said. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Rui Jiang? Jiang Rui. Americans are troublesome. What else do you know? Looking at the person in front of him, Zhang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Billy Wallen shook his head helplessly. I only know that they had been living in the XX Hotel in Boston before this, but on the first day of my accident, they had already run away. I called them for help, but at that time, they had already boarded the plane. Looking at Zhang Hai, Billy Wallen said seriously. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai looked at Azalina. It was difficult for Zhang Hai to tell whether this person was telling the truth or not, but Azalina had no problem. He is telling the truth. It seems that he only knows so much. Do you want to? Azalina saw Zhang Hai's gaze and chuckled. After she finished speaking, she made a throat-slitting gesture. You said that you would let me go, please, I just want to live, please. Hearing Azalina's words, Billy Wallen couldn't help but say excitedly. After such a big thing, the only thing he has to do is to live. He doesn't want to die. Don't worry, I'm very interested in what you said, so I won't kill you. Of course she won't either, but I won't leave this ship here. If you are lucky, swim back. I promise I won't trouble you again. Looking at Billy Wallen, who was scared out of his wits, Zhang Hai smiled faintly, then pulled him up and threw him into the sea. Although his hands were still covered, Billy Wallen grew up by the sea after all. He was a good swimmer. After entering the water, he didn't sink but swam vigorously. Although his physical strength was almost gone now, his willpower to live was stronger than anything else. As long as he was still alive, he had the hope of making a comeback. He must return the humiliation he suffered today in the future. Are you really going to let him go? Looking at Billy Wallen, who swam away quickly after falling into the water, Azalina couldn't help but frown. This Billy Wallen is different from ordinary enemies. If you cut the weeds without removing the roots, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Go. Haha, can he really go? Zhang Hai smiled and returned to his ship. He took out a barrel of gasoline and slowly poured it on the ship. When the gasoline was poured, Zhang Hai also returned to his boat with Azalina. Then, a Zippo lighter slowly lit up and was thrown onto the ship by Zhang Hai. Bang! In an instant, the entire ship was set ablaze, and under the blazing flames, a black figure rushed straight towards Billy Wallen, who was swimming on the surface of the sea. Bang! When Zhang Hai's ship sailed away from this sea area, the burning ship also exploded with a bang. Billy Wallen, who swam a few hundred meters away, only felt a huge force. Then he flew into the air in an instant. The last thing he saw was a bloody mouth biting his lower body. After a sharp pain, everything returned to normal. The browser crashed. Now it's so laggy that it vomits blood. I need to redo it after changing it. Chapter 4:18. This person named Jiang Rui does have a record of entering and exiting the country. The last video was the day before yesterday, which is the day after the incident here. But on the surface, this guy is just a tourist. There is no record to check. While looking at the record of this person named Jiang Rui, Zhang Hai listened to Moses Adams. Today was the third day after Zhang Hai was attacked. On the first day, he was in the police station. On the second day, he didn't know how the news spread. On the same day, a lot of people came to his manor. Zhang Dihai and the others came to visit Zhang Hai. Selena Gomez and Prawalton both called to come over, but they were stopped by Zhang Hai. Are you kidding me? Now, when he sees Selena Gomez and Prawalton, he will still feel awkward. As for other partners, such as Iron Bull Aniva, who sold Zhang Hai's fish seedlings, and Baker Gerard from the research lab, they all called. There were also some who wanted to visit Zhang Hai, but they were all stopped by him. Unknowingly, Zhang Hai did not know that he already had so many friends. In the evening, he went to see Billy Wallen. After returning home that night, he called Moses Adams and prepared to investigate the mastermind behind the scenes. But to be honest, the information about the person behind the scenes was not very good. Because on the surface, this Zhang Rue used to be a soldier in China. He was born in 1973 and became a soldier in 1991. After retiring in 2004, he disappeared for a period of time. It was said that he went to the Middle East to be a mercenary. He returned to China in 2010, and then there was completely no news about him. Until this year, he came to the United States as a tourist. No one knew what he was doing. Only Zhang Hai knew that this guy was here to deal with him. Are you sure this guy is behind the scenes? Moses Adams asked with some doubts as he looked at the family photo. To be honest, it was not difficult to get the information, but he found it hard to believe Zhang Hai's judgment. He shouldn't be the mastermind behind the scenes, but just another knife. Forget it, let's not talk about it. I'll ask around, how is my case going recently? Shaking his head, Zhang Hai looked at Moses Adams and asked. Zhang Hai now had 2 vicious dogs under his command. One of them was Azalina. There's no problem. The witnesses and material evidence are all here. Those who attacked the manor will definitely go in. Those who blocked the way will probably also be arrested, but they won't be sentenced for too long. But for us, as long as we go in, we can take action. After this incident, Zhang Hai's trust in this woman instantly increased from 0 to 80. This has reached the point where Zhang Hai does not doubt the people he uses, and this woman is also worth this line as far as the current situation is concerned. The second vicious dog is Moses Adams. This man is very much in line with Zhang Hai's mind, and he is getting more and more in line with him. He knows when he should do what, and he also knows how to share Zhang Hai's worries. Compared to these, the thing he wanted was money, which Zhang Hai did not lack the least. In fact, in the United States, as long as you have money, you have everything. Zhang Hai has plenty of money, so Moses Adams is quite loyal. Of course, he can't access Zhang Hai's core secrets, which is inevitable, but Zhang Hai is still very calm when he is asked to help clean up and solve some people who can be solved with money. Because this incident is relatively big, it may cost a lot. Looking at Zhang Hai, Moses Adams closed the report in his hand, shrugged at Zhang Hai, and said helplessly. But as soon as his voice fell, Zhang Hai had already picked up his phone and started to operate it. In less than a minute, a text message came on his phone, indicating that $20 million had been transferred to his bank account. The rest is yours. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams's eyes lit up. He likes this kind of generous boss the most. Zhang Hai is really good with money. At least he has never let him down. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams also stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, boss, I know what to do." Then, after reporting the situation in the past few days, he took the initiative to leave. After he left, Zhang Hai also took out his cell phone and called Qi Li. This person named Zhang Rue is indeed a little troublesome for Zhang Hai to investigate. But if he let Qi Li wake him up, there may be unexpected gains, so after thinking about it, he called her. "Hello, why are you calling me?" The phone rang less than 3 times before it was picked up, and Qi Li's excited voice came from the other side of the phone. She should be at home now, and there is the sound of TV next to her. "Are you at home?" It is now 8 o'clock in the morning in Zhang Hai's place, so it is 9 o'clock in the evening in China. 13 hours earlier. It is Hua Xia's time now. "Yeah, I'm watching TV." Listening to Zhang Hai's voice on the phone, Qi Li, who had just taken a shower at home and was watching TV, said with a smile. In recent days, she has been in a very good mood. The beef imported from Zhang Hai has become the main brand of her restaurant as she expected. The best beef in the world. She really wasn't wrong to call it that. Even if it was the best beef in Japan, it might not be as good as Zhang Hai's. She didn't feel any burden to call it that now. Since ancient times, Hua Xia has liked to be the middle, and people like to compete for the first place in everything. The world's best beef. Once this brand was out, it naturally attracted a large number of people's attention. After eating it once, they indeed felt that it was delicious. Of course, more people were just following the crowd. How many people could really tell whether the beef was good or bad? In China, there are basically only 4 kinds of beef. Beef brisket is stewed, beef shank is sauced, beef is fried and roasted, and beef offal is boiled. That's all. Not many people know about marbling and eye meat. This time, After Qi Li's explanation, more and more people know about it. Of course, knowing it costs money. A 7.5-ounce Zhanghai's high-quality steak, about 4.7 pounds, is sold here for 1,488 yuan. You can choose a chef to cook it in front of you on the spot. You can also choose to serve it after it is done. 2 yuan. 1 pound is nearly 3,000 yuan. Of course, the price is RMB. The raw material price of Zhanghai's beef is more than 2,400 yuan per pound. There is also the cost of labor, restaurant, water, electricity, tax, and some tributes. Selling it at this price is really not a lot of profit, but this kind of price, this kind of service, this kind of beef, the 3 flavors in one, instantly occupies the top consumer market in Imperial City. During this period of time, all the food and beverage companies chose to avoid anything related to the Qi family's beef for the time being. Some American consortiums saw the business opportunity here, so they wanted to buy it in the United States. However, they found that the Shanghai supermarkets and Walmart Group also have this kind of beef. When they asked about the price, they gave up. The wholesale price of this kind of beef was $420 per pound by the sea merchants, and $418 per pound by Walmart. $418 was equivalent to 2,700 renminbi. Including the transportation to China, the rental of the store, the payment of the tribute, the water and electricity, and the rental of the staff, they would lose money if they couldn't sell it for 3,800 renminbi per pound. However, Qi Li only sold it for 2,976 renminbi. Naturally, they couldn't compete. In this way, the high-end market for this kind of beef quickly closed. Now, the rich people in Imperial City come to eat it almost every day. And the rich people who come to Imperial City from other places have to ask someone to make an appointment if they want to eat a piece of beef. Models, actors, and other people who eat this kind of beef have to post it on Weibo to attract attention. The sky-high price of this kind of beef is also very popular on the internet. Even the media is involved, but there is nothing they can do. Because this kind of beef is traceable. It is not like the sky-high price of prawns or shredded potatoes, which use ordinary ingredients to cheat others. This kind of beef is the best kind of beef in the world. The price is right there, and it is destined that ordinary people can't afford it. Therefore, when the media saw that they can't cheat, they changed the topic and changed it to praise. So Qi Li has been living very comfortably these days. In the past, when Qi Group was at its peak, not many people paid attention to it. But now it is different. In just a few days, Qi Group's share price has increased by 20%. Some of the directors who had some complaints at first all shut up. This made Qi Li really happy these days. Now that she heard Zhang Hai's words, she started to talk to Zhang Hai. It's fine as long as the beef is good. Please help me investigate a person called Zhang Rue. I will send you his information later. Listening to Qi Li talking about the beef on the phone, Zhang Hai wiped his sweat. He naturally knows that the beef is good, but he didn't call to share the news with Qi Li. He has something to ask Qi Li to investigate. Zhang Rue. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li asked with some doubts. She is not familiar with this name. Yes, he is called Zhang Rue. He used to be a soldier and a mercenary. This time, he came to the United States to do something. He said that there is a big boss in the country, so I want to find out who he is. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai said indifferently. Although Zhang Hai said it casually, Qi Li knew that there must be something behind it. Her face instantly became serious. Okay, I got it. Give me a day. I will definitely find out. Then it's a deal. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai also smiled. He knew that with the Qi family's many years of connections in the country, it wouldn't be troublesome to find a person. Especially if they wanted to know who was behind this person, it would definitely not be troublesome. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Hai let out a long breath. This time, since he wants to pull out the nail, he will pull it out completely. Chapter 419. Director Qi. Hello, Director Qi. Good morning, Director Qi. Qi Li strode confidently in her high heels and walked quickly into the Qi Group building. Everyone who saw her bowed their heads respectfully and greeted her as Director Qi. However, what surprised them was that Director Qi, who usually had a cold face like an iceberg, seemed to have a good heart today. When they greeted her, she would respond with a smile. She even nodded when she saw some familiar faces, which made them feel flattered. Ever since Xueqi took over the company, her face had always been in a state of deep sorrow. Not to mention nodding and smiling, when she saw someone greet her while walking, she would not even squint her eyes. When she wanted to take the elevator, except for her personal secretary, no one was allowed to accompany her. Of course, she also had a separate elevator, which only stopped at 2 places, the first floor and the floor of her office, and this elevator was also not allowed to be used by others. If she was a woman in her 40s who was so cold every day, she would probably be called the cruel spinster behind her back. However, Xueqi was very beautiful and young. She was not even 30 years old, so no one called her the cruel spinster behind her back. Instead, they called her the Scarlet Serpent Fairy. Of course, this was also related to her previous life. However, today, the people in the company felt that their eyes were going blind. The Scarlet Serpent Fairy actually smiled. She actually smiled? The sun must have risen from the west. Many people who saw this muttered in their hearts. Could it be that she was so happy because the Chi Group's restaurant business was doing well recently? Or was it because she liked them? Of course, most people who thought this way were idiots and overly narcissistic. After all, this was also the first of the 3 biggest misconceptions in life. Director Chi is in a good mood today. After coming to her office, Xueqi's assistant, who had been following Xueqi all the time, didn't have a name until now. Looking at Xueqi, her assistant asked happily. Yes, let me tell you. Zhang Hai called me yesterday. After hearing her assistant's words, Xueqi sat down in her seat and fiddled with the documents on her desk while speaking mysteriously to her assistant. Ah. Hearing Xueqi's words, the assistant couldn't help but be at a loss for words. It seemed that she used to look down on Zhang Hai the most. When Zhang Hai called her, she almost wouldn't pick up. It was because of her attitude that this assistant dared to be so cocky to Zhang Hai. When did Zhang Hai's phone call have such a magical effect? Looking at Xueqi, who seemed to be immersed in happiness, the assistant couldn't help but sigh. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? By the way, what about the person I asked you to investigate last night? However, Xueqi didn't care about her assistant's thoughts. After she finished packing, she immediately asked her assistant. As the saying goes, the boss moves his mouth and the subordinate runs his legs. Yesterday, Zhang Hai asked her to investigate the person named Zhang Rue. After receiving the information, Xueqi immediately asked her assistant to start investigating. The first thing she asked at work today was to ask about this. I've already found the information. Just as Zhang Hai thought, the Qi family had worked hard here for so many years, so it was not a problem to get some information. After the assistant finished speaking, she handed the information in her hand to Xueqi. After Xueqi took it, she looked at it. Compared with the information found by Zhang Hai, Xueqi's investigation was obviously more detailed. This Zhang Rue was born in 1973. When he was 18 years old in 1991, because he injured someone, in order to escape the police's pursuit, he spent money to enter the army. He worked in the local army, the permanent army, the border defense force, and the Ace Division. Because he was extremely tough and brave, and he really didn't want to learn, the highest rank he could reach was a sergeant. In 2004, because he hit his boss, he was expelled from the army. Then he entered the Middle East, joined a French mercenary group there, participated in the US-Iraq War, and also went to Afghanistan for a permanent residence. 10 years later, he returned to China. His current job showed that he didn't have a job, but it seemed that he did some private work for others. Xueqi was familiar with these people, because the Qi family also had them, and these people were not assassinating their opponents. In Huaxia, it was important to leave people a way out so that they could meet each other in the future. Therefore, no one would touch the bottom line. However, if the other party were to play dirty, for example, finding a group of people to sit in front of your company or restaurant and not enter, they would just sit there and drink, throwing large beer bottles on the ground. Naturally, no one would dare to go in and eat. At this time, these people would be responsible for driving people away, or doing the same thing for the other party. It seemed that this Zhang Rue was such a person. According to Xueqi's investigation, this person's background seemed to be the Yan family. The Yan family? Looking at the information, Xueqi frowned. This person was related to the Yan family? Yes, we found out that in 1991, The person who helped Jiang Rui escape capture was Andrew Sun's father, and Zheng Jun, so behind him, there is a high possibility that the An family is behind him. Also, I recently found some information. This guy just returned from the United States a few days ago, and the most recent news from the United States is that a group of Grey Gang attacked Zhang Hai's manor, but we don't know the specific situation, only that they used guns. Looking at Qi Li in front of her, her assistant also said. What? Zhang Hai's manor? Hearing this, Qi Li was instantly shocked. She immediately picked up the phone and called Zhang Hai. At this time, Zhang Hai had just finished showering and was preparing to sleep in another room in Belle's house. There was no other way, the police hadn't removed the lockdown yet, so Zhang Hai could only go in to take some personal things. If he wanted to remove the lockdown, he would have to wait until the court hearing, which was 15 days. But after 15 days, the lockdown would be lifted, and Zhang Hai would have to renovate it. After all, he didn't have the habit of living in a bullet hole house. Hello. Seeing the phone ring, Zhang Hai picked it up, but just as he picked it up, he heard Qi Li's voice like a firecracker. Listening to her voice, Zhang Hai was confused. You had a shooting there? Are you okay? Are you hurt? I said that the US is too dangerous. Why don't you go back to China? Hey, can you hear me? How come there is no sound after you say hello? Listening to Qi Li's words on the phone, to be honest, Zhang Hai was a little tangled, because he didn't know what to say. I'm fine and I'm not hurt. I've solved the matter in the US, but I found out that these people may have been instructed by some people in China to attack me. So I want to know who those people in China are. Listening to Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai said faintly. This is a big deal for Zhang Hai. China? The Jiang Rui you asked me to investigate is the mastermind behind the scenes? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but be stunned. No, he is just one of the informants. The mastermind behind the scenes is his family's young master. I don't know who it is, so I asked you to help. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai also said slowly. And Zhang Wu, you bastard, I must kill you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li's good mood instantly turned bad. She has found out that this Jiang Rui is related to the An family. The An family's young master is either in Zhang Yong or in Zhang Wu. No matter who it is, Qi Li can't wait to tear them apart. And Zhang Wu? The one you saw during the New Year? Your first boyfriend? Hearing in Zhang Wu's name, Zhang Hai froze for a moment, then he remembered the identity of this person, and he couldn't help but be speechless for a while. What first boyfriend? That is my enemy who killed my father. Nothing happened between me and him. We didn't even kiss. Really, I swear. Hearing Zhang Hai's slightly joking voice say the words first boyfriend, Qi Li panicked instantly and immediately said on the phone. Hearing her explanation, Zhang Hai didn't know what to feel. After all, the two were still married on the surface. This state, sigh, it's really hard to say. But after hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai's heart must be a little uncomfortable. No matter what made Zhang Hai so unhappy, then Zhang Hai will kill him. At the same time, because of Qi Li, Zhang Hai also hated her a little. After pondering for a while, Zhang Hai said to Qi Li on the phone, whether there is anything else between you and him, to be honest, it has nothing to do with me. But if you still have him in your heart, then I may be sorry to you. By the way, please tell him that he may be out of luck, because I am going to go back and kill him. After Zhang Hai finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly. As for Qi Li, she sat in the boss's chair with a face full of confusion. Looking at the hung-up phone, she suddenly wanted to cry, but she didn't know how to cry. It seemed that because of her, Zhang Hai was implicated again. Looking at the phone screen, Qi Li immediately called, but unfortunately, the phone was disconnected at this time. She called several times in a row, but it didn't get through. She called again and again, it couldn't get through. She knew that this meant that she was also blacklisted by Zhang Hai. Seeing this, she was even more panicked. She panicked, not because Zhang Hai said that he would come back to kill in Zhang Wu. Even she wanted to kill him, but because this guy who should have died made the atmosphere between her and Zhang Hai, which had just picked up a little bit, fall below the freezing point again. Quick! Check the flights from the United States to the capital immediately. See which flight has Zhang Hai's name in the first-class cabin. Quick! After hanging up the phone, Qi Li immediately shouted to the assistant, who was also a little confused. She was really a little panicked. Chapter 420. Jiang, do you really not need us to go with you? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was packing his luggage, Moses Adams couldn't help but whisper to Jiang Hai. He was really worried that Jiang Hai would go back like this. Is his safety guaranteed? Don't worry, Azalina is with me, nothing will happen. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Last night, after receiving a call from Qi Li and confirming who his enemy was, Jiang Hai was ready to set off today. Jiang Hai was never a good person. Generally, he would take revenge on the spot. If the other party ran too far away, then he would take revenge as early as possible. 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge, but Jiang Hai takes revenge from morning to night. So this time, he was ready to go today and come back early. As for the others, Jiang Hai didn't plan to move.
Robbins and the others needed to take care of the ranch, Ai Dehua and the others needed to take care of the fishing ground, and even Aphrodite and the others needed to take care of the winery.
Moses Adams had more things to do. He needed to deal with the tourism in Winthrop Town, and he also needed to deal with the problem of those people. Jiang Hai said that he wouldn't let them come out after they went in, and he really had to do it. People like him are the most trustworthy. It's not that he doesn't have compassion, but it depends on who it is for. Jiang, let's go together. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was packing his things, Daliana and Marian also stood up. To be honest, the two girls were a little worried that no one would take care of their nominal father. Oh, that's fine too. Hearing Daliana and Marian's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Then he thought about it. Now that these two girls have been adopted by him for a while, it's time to take them back to see what Huaxia is like. After all, this was his home. Although his daughter was not related by blood, he should at least know. As for the danger, Jiang Hai was not worried. The country was not a tiger's den. This time, Azalina was there, so he did not need to worry too much. As for the two of them, he could protect them. Jiang, although I don't know why you're going to Huaxia this time, I feel that you might get into some trouble. If I can't leave here, you can take Penelope with you. After hearing that Jiang Hai was going to take Delina and Marian, Moses Adams hesitated for a second before telling Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai became stunned for a second. Penelope was Penelope Daller, Burke Daller's daughter. Jiang Hai had met her several times, but it was not a pleasant meeting. Therefore, Jiang Hai did not know much about this woman. But as Moses Adams said, with Jiang Hai's current identity, he could not avoid some trouble. It was still very useful to have a lawyer with him. Besides, it was just one more person, so he did not care. Okay, then I'll take her. During my absence, you have to take care of my manor. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment, then nodded hard. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Moses Adams was relieved. Then he called Penelope Daller. When she came, Jiang Hai also packed up the things he was going to take. It was convenient to have money. He did not need to bring too many things back to China. A few pairs of underwear, a change of clothes, and a mobile phone charger. That was all. He did not need to bring anything else, because he could buy them at any time in China. Things that could be bought in the United States could also be bought in China. It was just that the price was cheap and expensive. However, Jiang Hai was not short of money. Probably because of Jiang Hai's temperament, the three girls who were going to go with him did not bring too many things. 4 people and 4 bags, that was all. At the same time, Jiang Hai called the American Express. Don't forget, he was a Centurion Black Gold VIP with hundreds of millions of savings. If he wanted to book a ticket, he could book it at any time and any place. He booked 5 first-class tickets to the capital as soon as possible, and then he waited for Penelope Daller's arrival. Fortunately, this woman was also very capable. She quickly packed up her things and drove over. When she saw Burke Daller again, she was really at a loss. To be honest, she now believed that her father could make a lot of money with Jiang Hai, because her father had given her a lot of money. Although she didn't want the money and wanted to return it to her father didn't care, because he had already proved that he could also make a lot of money in the way of raising cattle with his own ability. Therefore, when she looked at Jiang Hai now, she was not as hostile as before. Instead, she was a little embarrassed. Now that everyone is here, let's go. Seeing that Penelope had also come, Jiang Hai said this and then drove his shield to the New York airport. There was no direct flight to Huaxia in Boston. Instead of waiting at the Boston airport to get on the plane to New York, it was better to drive there directly. To be honest, it was much faster than taking a plane. A few hours later, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the New York airport. After parking the car in the airport parking lot, Jiang Hai took the four beauties into the airport's VIP waiting room. After a short while, a special flight attendant came to remind him that it was time to board the plane. Since Jiang Hai spent so much money, the plane he took naturally would not be bad. With the best plane and the most expensive ticket, not only did Jiang Hai and the others have an independent space where they can lie down or sit, each person has a seat, but the plane also has a network, which is directly connected to the satellite. They can use it to surf the internet or play games to pass the time. Of course, the speed is definitely not fast. At the same time, everyone had a separate TV that could play movies and the like. Of course, there were also separate places like the Sky Bar, where they could not drink and play, but to gather and chat together. However, Jiang Hai had never been there before. He was only one person, so why would he go there? Of course, this was only unique to first-class flights. Ordinary economy and business cabins did not have it. Moreover, they could order food, drink, and even have a separate space. There was a row of bunks like the upper, middle, and lower bunks on the train to sleep. Of course, in fact, these bunks were not very comfortable, especially for people who were too big. Jiang Hai was obviously familiar with this plane. After all, he had sat in this plane 4 times. However, the other women were still a little scared of this luxurious first-class cabin, but Delina and Marion were still fine. Azalina and Penelope, on the other hand, had been looking around curiously ever since they boarded the plane. Not long after, the flight attendant came over and indicated that they were ready to take off. In the United States, different airlines had different requirements. Some airlines required that the plane be turned off when taking off and landing, but it could be used in the air, but it had to be in flight mode. Some airlines could directly turn on flight mode to use mobile phones in the air, and there was no need to turn off the phone. This was because the interference wave emitted by mobile phones only interfered with the base station on the ground, and it had nothing to do with the plane. Unlike in China, as long as you get on the plane, you are not allowed to use your mobile phone. Flight mode, in fact, was not useful in China. Now, Jiang Hai and the others were sitting in the plane. They were not allowed to turn on their mobile phones during takeoff and landing. Therefore, the flight attendant came over and gestured for everyone to turn off their phones. But just as everyone was about to turn off their phones, a voice came from Jiang Hai's side. Everyone looked over and saw a very fat guy talking loudly on the phone. "Hey, you can rest assured. I'm on the plane now. I'll arrive in the capital tomorrow. When the time comes, I'll help you return those things. Don't worry, the goods I sell will definitely not be a loss to you." Listening to him talking, the people next to him couldn't help but frown. They had to admit that in foreign countries, these Europeans and Americans didn't have a good first impression of Xueqi, just like now. Under the repeated reminders of the flight attendant, the fat guy turned off his mobile phone, but his face was slightly embarrassed. After making sure that he turned off his mobile phone, the flight attendant left his position and prepared to take off. After the fat guy watched the flight attendant leave, he couldn't help but turn his head to Jiang Hai's side. "Hey buddy, I said that this old American plane is strict enough. They even watched me turn off my mobile phone." Listening to the other party's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. If you weren't so ignorant, why would they watch you turn off your mobile phone? But what surprised Jiang Hai even more was how this guy concluded that he was Xueqi. "How do you know that I am Xueqi?" Looking at the fat guy, Jiang Hai asked strangely. "Hey, Xueqi people have a sense of righteousness." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. What kind of righteousness is this? These words were just to fool them. Those little Qing. He wasn't young anymore. Would these words work on him? Well, actually, when you turned off your mobile phone, it showed simplified Chinese. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Wang Yang. I am in the jewelry business. You can call me Fatty Wang. Brother, where did you get rich?" Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, the guy named Fatty Wang smiled embarrassedly, but thinking that there was still a 13-hour flight, he would suffocate if he didn't speak. "My name is Jiang Hai. I opened a manor in Boston to raise cattle." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said indifferently. He now likes to say that he raises cattle or fish. As for whether this will make others look down on him, Jiang Hai doesn't care. He doesn't live in the eyes of others. They can think whatever they want. What does it have to do with Zhang? Raising cattle? It seems that the manor should be large. However, Fatty Wong did not laugh at Zhang, but said with a smile. Chapter 421. Hearing the fat man's words, Zhang couldn't help but laugh. How did he see through it? How did you know? Looking at the fat man, Zhang couldn't help but turn around and said with a serious face. The two girls behind you came with you, right? Hearing Zhang words, the fat man couldn't help but point at Daliana and Marian, who happened to be sitting behind Zhang with his mouth, and said with a smirk on his face. Both of them are my daughters. Hearing his words, Zhang also glanced back and didn't find any expensive clothes on Daliana and Marian. These two were the same as Zhang. They usually didn't recognize any brands. As long as they thought the clothes looked good, they would buy them. They weren't people who would change themselves because of clothes. So while their clothes weren't cheap, they weren't luxury goods either. Each piece of clothing cost around $100, which wasn't cheap when converted to RMB. But in the United States, this price was indeed not expensive. Now the clothes they were wearing were a loose chiffon top and a pair of tight jeans, which showed off their long legs. They were wearing a pair of flat canvas sneakers. It was very simple, but Zhang hated wearing sneakers the most. On the contrary, they liked it very much. Just from the way they were dressed, it was really hard to tell that these two girls were rich. Oh, I don't know what clothes they are wearing, but I am a gem merchant. The bracelets they are wearing are not cheap. They can be sold for 100 or 200,000 yuan in China. Looking at Zhang, Fatty Wong said excitedly. Sure enough, when Zhang looked back, he found that the diamond bracelets on the wrists of the two girls were still shining. This bracelet was given to them by Qi Li. Maybe women are naturally interested in shiny things. Therefore, both Delina and Marian liked this bracelet very much. However, they were usually reluctant to wear it. They only wore it today when they went out. However, compared to their clothes, this bracelet was indeed a bit too flashy. The main diamond of this bracelet seems to be above 70 points because of the fiery color, and the other diamonds are above 30 points because of the light. The connection should be platinum, which was specially designed, so the price of this bracelet is definitely not cheap. Facing Zhang, the fat man said with a serious face. He had to admit that this world was really full of experts. If you asked Zhang to understand this, he wouldn't understand it. But this Fatty Wong did know these things very well. Diamonds were mainly about 4C, but when the other 3 Cs were about the same, the last 3 Cs, weight, was the most important thing. Diamonds that were less than 30 points were really not necessary to be used as ring faces or the like. Among the diamonds, only when the diameter of a single diamond was more than 4.5 millimeters and the weight was more than 0.3 carats could it show a strong light, that is to say, it could dazzle people. When it reached 70 points, that was more than 0.7 carats, it would show a fiery color. Zhang didn't know what a fiery color was, he just heard these people talking about it, that's all. It seems that you know a lot about these things. Why did you come to the United States this time? Listening to Fatty Wong's endless speech, Zhang also nodded. He did learn something. Anyway, he had nothing to do here, so he asked him this question. I'm a jewelry dealer. I specialize in running back and forth between Western countries and our country to make some money. Hearing Zhang words, Fatty Wong said that Westerners and Easterners had different aesthetic standards, and they liked different things. In addition to gold, which everyone liked, there was a saying in China that gold had a price, but jade had no price. So in China, the real value was jade, and in foreign countries, it was gemstones. Fatty Wong's job was to get some gemstones in China, sell them in the United States or Europe, and then get some jade from Europe and the United States, and sell them in China. Although this thing was not produced in China, the best jade was naturally in Southeast Asia. However, it was not that there were no mines in Europe and the United States, but this thing could not be sold at a high price locally. It was naturally the best result for him to buy it. In the following time, he began to popularize the relationship between gemstones and jade to Zhang. Among the 5 most precious gemstones in the world, the most expensive one was of course diamonds. Colored diamonds of more than 5 carats could not be seen in physical stores, and could only be seen in auction houses. Thinking back, Zhang Hai had made a fortune with colored diamonds. In addition to diamonds, the second most expensive gemstone was ruby, the third was sapphire, the fourth was beryl, and the fifth was gold and emerald. Of course, the lower the price, the cheaper it was. For example, a recently famous ruby ring called Burmese Starlight weighed 19 carats and was encrusted with diamonds. The reference price was only $45,000. A 19-carat diamond could not be bought even with a zero behind it. Rubies were mainly divided into Burmese red, Mozambique red, and Starlight red. Among them, Pigeon Blood red, the best one in Burmese red, was $6,000 per carat. Mozambique red was more expensive, and those above 3 carats could even be sold for $18,000 per carat. It was really famous in Europe. Starlight red was the cheapest. A carat was between $700 and $1,400, and the best one could hardly be sold for $3,200 per carat. Of course, in Zhang Hai's view, these things were almost the same. The sapphire, beryl, and golden emerald were cheaper. Sapphire and the like were also produced in China, and the price was not high. Is yours gold and emerald too? Listening to Fatty Wong's introduction for a long time, Zhang Hai also looked at his wrist, where he also wore a string of chains, but this string of chains was colorful, with red, yellow, blue, green, and all kinds of colors. Seeing this guy talking so enthusiastically, Zhang Hai could not help but ask him, "Oh no, mine is tourmaline." Fatty Wong heard Zhang Hai's words and said to him with a smile, "Tourmaline." Hearing his words, Zhang Hai was stunned again. What the hell is tourmaline? Tourmaline is still very valuable in our country. Of course, it is far worse than the 5 gems above. It was not valuable originally. In 10 years, it was sold for 400 renminbi per gram. It was a gram, not a carat. But in recent years, it is said that the Empress Dowager of the Qing dynasty liked this thing very much, so the price doubled. Now the best one is sold for tens of thousands of RMB per gram. I came here this time mainly to buy this thing. Seeing that Zhang Hai did not understand, Fatty Wong said again, "Speaking of tourmaline, this kind of thing was really worthless. Before the Ming dynasty, this kind of thing should have no value at all. But in the Qing dynasty, at first, it was worn by the officials. It was often seen in TV series before. When the emperor was angry, he said that he would take off the official's crown. The crown referred to this kind of thing. In the later period, because Xueqi liked it, it was also very popular among the nobles of the Qing dynasty. But this thing was produced everywhere in the world. Except in Huaxia, it could be sold for some historical reasons, but it was not valuable abroad. This thing was produced in Kenya, China, Madagascar, Mozambique, Namibia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Italy, the United States, Burma, Brazil and some countries in South America. Huaxia, Xinjiang, Nanyun, Mongolia and other provinces also produced it, and the output was not small. So it was not realistic to expect it to be sold at the same price as diamonds. So abroad, this thing was worth more than $10 per gram, but in China, as long as the quality was good, dozens of US dollars would be worth at least 2 zeros. Hearing this, Zhang Hai could not help but be surprised. He did not expect these things to be so valuable. This is the green ghost in the tourmaline. If I sell it in China, it will be worth hundreds of thousands of US dollars, but I buy it in the United States. It only costs 1,000 US dollars, and it is still good. Looking at the shocked expression on Zhang Hai's face, the fat man didn't show off his wealth. Instead, he proudly showed it off. He took out a dark green zodiac symbol that he always wore on his chest and showed it to Zhang Hai. To put it bluntly, he was not afraid that Zhang Hai would do this business, because this kind of business was not something that anyone could do. First of all, you had to have a place to buy these things in the United States. Because Americans did not like these things, there were no stores on the streets of the United States. You had to go to some places of origin and talk to their bosses. Secondly, these things had to go through customs, which required a lot of procedures. Entering customs, especially the customs of Huaxia, not only did it require procedures, but also someone above. Otherwise, just the tax alone would make you lose a lot. This was also a very realistic thing. Otherwise, not everyone could do it. Therefore, Fatty Wong did not care to show off these things to Zhang Hai, and Zhang Hai naturally would not give up his manner to do such a business. But when he looked at these gems, his mind suddenly flashed.
He remembered that he seemed to have seen such gems before, just in the sea of his manor.
If it was a mineral vein, then wouldn't he be rich again? He had to admit that sometimes when fortune came, money could not be stopped even if he wanted to.
If it was really a tourmaline mine, it was definitely not worth much in the United States, but if it was calculated according to the domestic price, TSK.
Thinking of this, Zhang Hai's eyes could not help but shine. It seemed that he had opened up another branch business. While chatting with Fatty Wong casually, the plane flew quickly towards the capital. After sleeping, unknowingly, the more than 10 hours of flight was officially over. As the plane landed smoothly at the capital airport, Zhang Hai, who was sitting in the chair, could not help but stretch. Tourmaline or something, he would not think about it for the time being. Since he was already here, someone should be unlucky. That guy actually dared to play dirty with him. Zhang Hai would play him to death. Chapter 422. Woo! As the plane whistled and landed on the runway of the Imperial Capital Airport, two people were standing there anxiously at the pickup aisle, looking at these two people. Originally, other people who came to pick them up would glance at them from time to time. The men looked at them because these two women are really beautiful. They are really tall and have long legs. Coupled with their office lady clothes, they look extremely attractive. If it weren't for the innate cold appearance of these two women, there would definitely be a lot of people coming to hit on them. Even so, from time to time, there will be a person who will take the initiative to walk past them and take a look at them. At the same time, he will show off his masculine body, trying to get the phone number of these two women. But unfortunately, these two women have no interest in other people around them. As for the women who looked at these two people, they have different thoughts. Some people are secretly cursing these two vixens in their hearts. Some people are envious of the clothes they are wearing, the jewelry they are wearing, and the bags they are carrying. Because in the eyes of these gold diggers, the things on these two women add up to almost 1 million. 1 million. It's just a thought. Just when the men were in love and the women were jealous, they saw the plane they have been waiting for a long time officially landing. Seeing this, the faces of the two women became more anxious. They looked at the exit with a serious face, waiting for the arrival of the group of people they are going to pick up. It has to be said that sometimes, there will always be some people who feel good about themselves. Looking at these two women, other people can feel the cold aura on their bodies. They are clearly not here to make friends, but there are always some people who are exceptions. Hey, beauty, add me on WeChat. Just when the two of them were anxiously looking at the international exit, a slightly flirtatious voice came from the side. Then, a guy with a slick face flashed in front of the two of them and said with a confident face, "Get lost." But unfortunately, these two people don't have time to pay attention to him now. The leader of the two women said with a cold face, "Hey, stop pretending, let's make friends." However, that person clearly has no intention of retreating. Instead, he continued to stand there and said with a smirk on his face, "Obviously, this guy has been flirting with girls for a long time. He won't back down just because of this sentence. I'll say it again. Get lost." Looking at this guy, the woman in front of him couldn't help but frown. Her face turned cold, but the man in front of her didn't care and continued to talk. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Dong Shanha, and my father is Dong XX from XX province. Does it sound familiar? My father is the richest man in our province, and he is also a member of the National People's Congress. This time, he is going abroad for business, and I am here to pick him up. But if the two of you want to get to know my father, I can introduce you to him. But after you meet him, you have to accompany me to have some fun." The greasy-haired fella said with a smile as he looked at the two women before him. Upon hearing his words, the expressions of the two women turned even uglier. They really hadn't looked at the almanac recently. They really met all kinds of people. Just when they were being pestered by this guy and had no way to leave, the figure they had been waiting for a long time finally came out of the exit, but to their surprise, there were 4 women who came out with him. Yes, the people who came out were none other than Zhang Hai and the others, and the people waiting for Zhang Hai were none other than Qili and her assistant. When she saw Zhang Hai come out, Qili immediately waved her arm at Zhang Hai, but Zhang Hai acted as if he didn't see it and left from another exit. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Qili couldn't help but be speechless. She subconsciously wanted to chase after him, but the man in front of her blocked her way. Get lost. Xueqi said this word for the third time. In addition to anxiousness, there was already some anger in her eyes. I won't, otherwise, you can add me on WeChat, and I will let you go. Looking at Xueqi's flustered and exasperated look, the man said with a complacent look, as if he had already eaten Xueqi. But unfortunately, he thought that Xueqi was too harmless. Looking at the man in front of her, Xueqi went up and kicked this guy's calf heavily. In an instant, this guy held his leg and tilted to the side. Xueqi also took her assistant and ran quickly to Zhang Hai, and finally stopped Zhang Hai at the exit. Zhang Hai, did you see me just now? You saw me, and you still want to leave? Looking at Zhang Hai, Xueqi said with some gasps, and hearing her words, Zhang Hai also looked at her calmly. Oh, I saw you, but weren't you talking to that kid? Who is that kid? Your new boyfriend? Looking at the guy who was still holding his leg and jumping in the distance, Zhang Hai said calmly. Yeah, Zhang Hai, I only have you as my husband, no matter if you believe it or not. Oh, forget it. Let's go back first, okay? Looking at Zhang Hai's stubborn look, Xueqi was really going crazy. How can this guy be so stubborn? But now is not the time to talk about this, so Xueqi pulled Zhang Hai and wanted to leave first. Oh, we have already booked the hotel, and the hotel car should be outside. However, Xueqi pulled Zhang Hai, but she didn't move. Zhang Hai just stood there and continued to say indifferently. Do we have to be like this between us? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi couldn't help but tremble. She looked at Zhang Hai's eyes with a serious face and said word by word. Zhang Hai's current attitude really made her feel that she was going crazy. There doesn't seem to be any relationship between us. Oh, a cooperative relationship. Looking at Xueqi, Zhang Hai said calmly. Well, you can say what kind of relationship it is. If you don't want to go home with me, you can go to the hotel, but you can't be naive to think that you can solve in Chonggu by coming here yourself. You still need my help. Looking at Zhang Hai, Xueqi said with a serious face. She was really speechless with Zhang Hai. This guy is a stone in the toilet, smelly and hard. Forget it. What if you help your first love at the critical moment? Then wouldn't I be digging my own grave? Hearing Xueqi's words, Zhang Hai smiled, then shook his head, directly bypassed Xueqi and walked out. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Xueqi really opened her mouth wide this time, but she didn't know what to say. President Qi, what should we do now? Seeing Zhang Hai walking out, Xueqi's assistant asked Xueqi with a face full of grievances. She was complaining for Xueqi, because she knew that Xueqi and Chongwu didn't have any relationship. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were like fire and water now, but Zhang Hai's attitude towards Xueqi really made her feel that it was not worth it for Xueqi. Let's go and follow him. Feeling her assistant's emotions, Xueqi took a deep breath. After suppressing the trace of unhappiness in her heart, she took the initiative to follow Zhang Hai out of the airport. She got into the car and followed Zhang Hai's car all the way to the city. The car drove by the Peninsula Hotel to pick them up. The hotel Zhang Hai checked in this time was the Peninsula Hotel near the Prince's Mansion in the center of the capital. This hotel was a hotel in Hong Kong, and it was a good place in the neighborhood. Zhang Hai booked a total of 4 suites here, one for himself, one for Delina and Marion, one for Azalina, and one for Penelope Doll who followed them. After arriving at the hotel, they got their keys and went straight upstairs. After telling the 4 girls that he would treat them to a meal later, Zhang Hai went back to his room to take a shower and relax, but before he took off his clothes, someone knocked on his door. He opened the door and found that the person standing in front of him was none other than Xueqi. Why did you follow me here? Looking at Xueqi, Zhang Hai was stunned. She was very different from the President Qi in his impression, who could not bear any grievance. His tone was so harsh, so she should have gone back long ago. I don't care what you say, but I have to say it clearly. I don't care what you think. I have to make it clear that Zhongwu and I used to be friends, but nothing happened between us. You know what happened after we returned to China. He and I are enemies now, and I can't wait to bite him to death. What happened to you this time was indeed because of me. But no matter what, now our opponents are the same. An enemy's enemy is a friend. I think we should unite instead of arguing with me like this. Looking at Zhang Hai, Qili directly pushed Zhang Hai aside and walked into Zhang Hai's room. As soon as the door was closed, she said to Zhang Hai excitedly. Looking at her state, Zhang Hai was stunned. I think you have misunderstood.
First, I didn't argue with you because you said that except for the current status of husband and wife, I am basically a stranger. Oh no, a business partner because you are still buying my beef.
Second, I don't care what the relationship between you and Zhangwu is. I only know that he wants to mess with me, so I will mess him up. And most importantly, I can't believe that the relationship between us will make you stand on my side. After all, you used to be so close to him. Looking at Qili, Zhang Hai slowly stretched out his hand and said what he wanted to say. Why are you so stubborn? I left you in Bing City and did not care about you. It's my fault. I already know that I'm in the wrong. I've already gone to Boston to look for you. Did I say anything about you messing around with so many women outside? I still have to help you take care of them in the capital. Have you ever thought about me? Why am I so aggrieved? For you, not for your stupid cow. Seeing Zhang Hai being so heartless, Qili finally couldn't help shouting at Zhang Hai. Chapter 423. Ah! Looking at the crazy Qili in front of him, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be at a loss for words. In fact, in his opinion, a breakup between him and Qili was inevitable. After all, this meant that the old him died and the new him was reborn. So, from the beginning, he didn't intend to have too much interaction with Qili because the two of them were not the same kind of people. And to be honest, he didn't consider the problem of whether Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi needed protection in the country. Because if they couldn't survive, they could just go to his place. He couldn't be more happy. But now that Qili said this, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say. He didn't know when it started. Maybe it was after he saved her from the mountain lion's mouth, but her indifferent feelings towards him seemed to have gradually changed. She might have feelings for him. Zhang Hai also thought about it before, but as soon as it popped up, he erased it. After all, he had always been very dull when it came to feelings. He didn't want to think too much about it. After all, he fell on this woman's body before, and it was quite painful. Previously, it was said more than once that Zhang Hai was a timid person. As long as someone hurt him once, he would never get close to her again in his life. It didn't matter if he was narrow-minded or not. This was Zhang Hai, a living Zhang Hai. His way of protecting himself was to use violence to curb violence. When violence couldn't achieve his goal, he would stay away from the other party. But now, in front of him, Qili threw this confession in his face. It was Zhang Hai's turn to be embarrassed. In short, you can't just go to him like this. We still need to think about it. The country is different from foreign countries. There are too many implications in doing things. Pulling out a carrot will not only create a hole, but it may also create a field. The network of relationships is too complicated. If you just jump in rashly, you will suffer. Looking at Zhang Hai's embarrassment, Qili's face couldn't help but blush. After her outburst, her mentality calmed down a lot. She took a deep breath and then slowly began to speak to Zhang Hai. She knew that only at this time, Zhang Hai would listen to her. Once it's done, I'll leave. At worst, I won't come back in the future. Looking at Qili, Zhang Hai said calmly. You can't leave just because you want to. The Yin family's power is much more powerful than you think. Don't be fooled by the fact that they only run a restaurant. If they want to do business safely in the capital, there must be a lot of big shots above them, especially in restaurants. They have too many connections with people from all walks of life. Maybe the moment you make a move, they will have already cancelled your passport. Where can you go by then? Looking at Zhang Hai, Qili said seriously. When Zhang Hai heard her words, he couldn't help but be a little speechless. Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to have brought too many people. He should have only brought Azalina here. If something happens, she naturally has the ability to protect herself, and Zhang Hai can directly go into the sea and tame a shark or something, then he can swim back to the United States. But now he has Delina, Marion, and Penelope Doll with him. If something really happens, it will be a very troublesome thing for him. It's getting late, let's go for a meal. Seeing that Zhang Hai seemed to really listen to her, Qili couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. As long as Zhang Hai listened to her, it was a good thing for her. At least Zhang Hai wouldn't be in danger. At the same time, She also felt that the relationship between her and Zhang Hai was slowly moving forward. Phew. Let's go, I'll call them. Let's have a buffet downstairs? Such a 5-star hotel naturally had a buffet. For the average working-class family, spending more than 200 yuan per person for a meal was indeed a rather inappropriate thing to do. For example, Zhang Hai's group of 6, oh no, and Qi Li's assistant, that's 7 people, adding up to more than 1,000 yuan. But for Zhang Hai, more than 200 yuan per person is actually not expensive, especially with his current wealth. My family runs a restaurant. What are you eating here for? Let's go to the restaurant. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Li glanced at Zhang Hai. It's not that she doesn't want Zhang Hai to spend this money. With their wealth, they really don't care about 1,000 or 800 yuan. However, Zhang Hai's first meal back in China is not in her family's restaurant, which makes her somewhat uncomfortable. Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai also nodded. Since she said so, then let's go. Then he called the other 4 girls. The 4 girls were a little surprised that Zhang Hai and Qi Li were standing together. Because they were clearly quarreling just now, how come they made up now? They can't guess Zhang Hai's thoughts. But whether it's Delina, Marian, Azalina, or Penelope, these people know when to say what. So they didn't say much, but followed Zhang Hai downstairs again and went to the door. Qi Li's assistant has been waiting for a long time. She specially arranged 2 cars, one for Zhang Hai, Qi Li, and herself, and the other for the 4 girls. Zhang Hai didn't say anything about this arrangement, he just stepped directly into the car. But when they were driving, the atmosphere in the car was obviously very awkward. Zhang Hai didn't have anything to say to Qi Li, and Qi Li didn't know what to say to Zhang Hai. The atmosphere in the car was awkward and strange. But fortunately, the restaurant wasn't far from the hotel. After about 10 minutes of driving, they arrived. After getting out of the car, Zhang Hai looked at the restaurant in front of him and couldn't help but secretly nod. He has to admit that Qi Li does have a way of doing business.
Under the background of the current environment, the imperial court is very strict with public funds and so on.
This has almost cut off more than 70% of the customer flow. But Qi Li's high-end Western restaurant is not like other restaurants at this time. Instead, its business is very good. In the parking lot in front, there are all kinds of cars parked. Inside the restaurant, there is naturally a lot of people. If other restaurants see this, they will probably curse on the street. But the people who really know the business know that Qi Li's restaurant is popular for a reason. Raw materials. This was the biggest difference between Qi Li's restaurant and other restaurants. The top-grade ingredients in other restaurants were basically stir-fried. For example, some brands of white wine would be sold at a different price if they were sold outside. For example, lobsters, which are sold for dozens of yuan outside, are sold for hundreds of yuan here. Some people say that this is selling for money. But for most people who spend their own money, why should they charge more than 10 times, or even dozens of times more for their skills? They won't do this. So after the imperial court ordered a crackdown, these restaurants don't have a good life. But the steak in Qi Li's restaurant is the best steak. You can't buy it in other places no matter how much money you spend. The best beef in the world, at least in China, was the only one. Some people went to the United States and found that the price of the same beef was not much different. This made the original mentality of the people in China gradually calm down. This was the real thing. The rich people also felt comfortable with spending money to eat. This was the biggest difference between Qi Li's restaurant and other restaurants. The meat is good. This is the hard truth. In fact, not only the rich people like to come here, but also some gold-collar and white-collar workers who have some spare money like to come here. Of course, they can't afford such expensive steaks, but some other food is also good for them. In addition, there are many people who come here to raise their status or to show that they have better taste. Recently, they will also come here. Of course, they come here because there are spendthrifts paying for them. Some famous socialites will even be given a commission by Qi Li. This is all money. It is precisely because of these reasons that this restaurant is now full of people coming and going, and it is lively. Please, I have arranged a place. After seeing the slightly surprised look in Zhang Hai's eyes after getting out of the car, Qi Li's mouth curved into a rare smile. She raised her chin and showed the posture of a queen again. Then, she stretched out her hand and led Zhang Hai and the others into the restaurant. But just as they walked in, they happened to see a group of people going out. Most of these people were Huaxia people. Although the weather outside in June was already quite hot, these people were all wearing suits and ties. They were meticulously dressed from head to toe, so they didn't feel hot at all. Among them, there are some foreigners. These people are obviously from the Arabian region because the man in the lead is wearing a traditional Arabian white robe, talking and laughing with the people around him. When Zhang Hai and this person met, both of them were obviously stunned. Then, the Middle Eastern man stretched out his hand and walked over happily. As he walked, he said, "Hi, Zhang Hai, my friend. I didn't expect to see you here." Seeing the Middle Eastern man coming over, Zhang Hai also walked over with a smile, and the two hugged. "I am from Huaxia. It is not strange to see me here, but I am still very curious to see you here. Du Feimin Weihe?" "Ah." Looking at the person in front of him, Zhang Hai also said with a smile. Yes, the person in front of him is none other than the Middle Eastern tycoon, a member of the royal family of Dubai, Du Feimin Weihe Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Of course, Zhang Hai can't remember so many names, it's like a scam. Just call me Du Feimin. I have nothing to do now, so I run around the world. Huaxia has a long history, so I am still very interested in this place. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin said with a smile. Zhang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It is a benefit for Zhang Hai that he doesn't have to call him by his full name. Of course, if he kept writing his full name, it would be a piece of cake for him to write the story. Chapter 424. Hi Zhang. Are you here to eat beef too? This restaurant's beef is really good. Seeing Zhang Hai, Du Feimin was very enthusiastic. He directly pulled Zhang Hai to the entrance and talked to him. As for the Huaxia people beside him, other than smiling, they didn't do anything else. They didn't dare to do anything else. Du Feimin was not only a rich and powerful Middle Eastern tyrant, but also a member of the royal family of Dubai. He didn't come here only to represent himself, but also the country of Dubai. A few days ago, he had met the current emperor. These people accompanying him didn't dare to have any complaints. As for these people, when others saw them, they didn't dare to make a fuss. Of course the beef here is good. This is the beef produced in my manor. Hearing Du Feimin praising the beef here, Zhang Hai also felt honored. He smiled and said to Du Feimin, causing Du Feimin to be stunned for a moment. Your beef. Looking at Zhang Hai, Du Feimin couldn't help but feel a little surprised. After he came here a few days ago, the first meal he ate was the state banquet that the emperor gave him after meeting the current emperor. But to be honest, the state banquet was very delicious to the people of Huaxia. However, to Du Feimin, the taste was ordinary. Therefore, the next day after the state banquet, he asked the people accompanying him to help him look for delicious beef. Qi Li's restaurant came into their sights. After coming here and tasting it, they really felt that it was very delicious. Moreover, Du Feimin was used to being rich. Therefore, he came here every day to eat. Now that he heard that the beef was Zhang Hai's, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. I raise cows. Didn't you know? Looking at his shocked expression, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile and say, Wow, I really didn't know. Can I go to your place to have a look when I have time? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin said with a smile. And hearing his words, Zhang Hai naturally agreed. Looking at Zhang Hai, Du Feimin patted Zhang Hai's shoulder and said with a smile, Next month or so, I should go to the US again. At that time, I will definitely visit your manor. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked Zhang Hai, By the way, you will be staying here for a while, right? I should stay here for a while. After thinking for a while, if he didn't deal with those people, it would be difficult for him to leave. That's it then. I'll be holding a cocktail party in 3 days. Remember to come. All right, I won't disturb your meal any longer. I'll leave first. Glancing at the 6 girls behind Zhang Hai, Du Feimin purposely blinked his eyes. Then, he glanced at Zhang Hai with a gaze that all men would understand before leaving with a smile. Looking at his appearance, Zhang Hai couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. When did this guy become so dirty? However, Zhang Hai didn't have the leisure to care about him now. Although he was rich, he was also rich. What was the use of having so much money? If he had enough to spend, he wouldn't have enough. So after saying goodbye to Du Feimin, he walked into the restaurant. However, Zhang Hai didn't notice. While he was greeting Du Feimin, the person beside Du Feimin had been staring at him the whole time. Some people even began to search for something with their mobile phones. It was understandable. A person who was so close to Du Feimin couldn't be treated carelessly. After the two separated, a middle-aged man who had been accompanying Du Feimin made a gesture. Then, a young man quietly left the group and walked into the restaurant. However, at this time, Zhang Hai had already walked into the restaurant with Xueqi. Xueqi had already arranged everything here. As soon as they walked in, a waiter deliberately led them to a special room on the side. Although most of the restaurant had small partitions, there was also a private room. Inside the private room, there was a huge square table. In the middle of the table, there was a special place for the chef to cook. Here, the main dish was Western food, steak, and teppanyaki. You can choose Western food or teppanyaki. After all, both of these dishes were quite good. After Zhang Hai and the others sat down, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s walked into the middle of the table and began to prepare the dishes. This is Master Zhang Ducheng, the best Western food chef and teppanyaki chef in China. I specially hired him from Japan. Seeing Zhang Hai's slightly curious gaze, Xueqi said with a smile. The man also nodded gently to Zhang Hai. Without saying much, he began to cook. Although the portion was for 7 people, the chef's cooking was really good. He was very fast. Soon, the beef and seafood prepared by Xueqi were divided into 7 portions. After cooking, they were placed on their respective plates. To be honest, this was the first time that Zhang Hai ate his own beef on teppanyaki, so he was a little curious. Zhang Hai didn't need to do anything because there was a prepared black pepper sauce on it. He put a piece of beef into his mouth. The moment his teeth touched the beef, the juicy taste of Zhang Hai's beef, coupled with the fresh taste of the grass, the taste of the beef, and the abundance of spiritual energy, instantly filled Zhang Hai's mouth. It's worthy of being my beef. Narrowing his eyes, he quickly chewed this piece of beef into pieces and threw it into his stomach. Zhang Hai couldn't help but let out a long sigh of satisfaction. He suddenly realized that he was really wasteful in the past. Although he knew that Zhang Hai's beef was so good, he really didn't expect it to be so good. In the past, Zhang Hai's beef could be rated 90 points by himself. He was very afraid that he would be too proud, so he deducted it. Now he realized that beef could be rated 100 points, but the beef he made could only be rated 70 points. As for the beef made by a professional chef, it could be rated 120 points. This was the difference. It seems that after going back, I have to consider hiring a professional chef. Narrowing his eyes, Zhang Hai whispered in a low voice. I know. Teacher Xanthi's father is a professional French chef. You can ask him to cook. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Marian immediately raised her hand and looked at Zhang Hai seriously. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai touched his chin. If it was really possible for him to get together with Cindy Clive, asking his father-in-law to come over and cook, it didn't seem too good, because Zhang Hai didn't seem to be a good man. Seeing his father-in-law in the villa all day long, Zhang Hai would also feel uncomfortable. In this world, not only the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was not good, but the relationship between son-in-law and father-in-law was also not good. Cough if you feel good, I can help you keep an eye out. However, the person who was more nervous was not Zhang Hai, but Xueqi. No joke, she also knew who Xueqi Clive was. Although the two had not met, they both knew each other's existence. Why didn't Xueqi show too much hostility to Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, but only gently beat them? This was because she knew that it was impossible for these two women to climb up the ranks and become official servants. To put it bluntly, these two women were concubines in ancient times. Perhaps they couldn't even be considered concubines. They were just maidservants in the same room. Such women were destined to be unable to compete with her for the position of wife. But Xueqi Clive was different. If Zhang Hai really had something to do with her, then maybe he wouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, it tastes good. Can you tell me about the Yin family? At this time, Zhang Hai obviously did not want to say too much in this regard. After all, he was not very close to Xueqi Clive recently, and he also felt a little guilty. So after hesitating for a moment, Zhang Hai asked Xueqi the most important thing this time, which was also the purpose of their visit. An family is an old family in the imperial capital. The current head of the family is An Dasun, the father of An Zhongwu and An Zhongyong. According to legend, his great-grandfather was an officer in the Beiyang army. After the surrender of Japan, he was one of the first people to enter the imperial capital. After Taizu established the country, he led his troops to surrender, then withdrew from the army and took root in the imperial capital. Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Li quickly said. Qi Li's hatred for the An family was not a joke, so she was very clear about the An family situation.
Although the An family once had the merit of supporting the emperor, there were many people who had the merit of supporting the emperor. At the time, their ancestor was the most powerful, but he was only a colonel, and did not have any real power. In the generation of An Zhongwu's grandfather, they could not live anymore, so they entered the business circle. Therefore, the An family was considered to be one of the weaker clans of the previous dynasty. They did not have many members, and there were not many people who were involved in politics. Furthermore, none of them had ever entered the army.
When there was no connection between interests, human feelings would gradually fade. Not long after, the An family gradually became a business family. Otherwise, the An family, who was born and raised in the capital, would not have to spend so much effort to deal with the Qi family, who was an outsider. Not to mention the large families in the country, even some second-rate families in the capital could easily deal with the Qi family. However, because they were born and raised in the capital, even if the Qi family had a great advantage, it would not be easy to deal with the An family. If Zhang Hai really did what he did in the United States, and asked Azalina to deal with the An family as soon as he came, not to mention whether it could be done. It was estimated that the people who had a grudge against the An family, such as Zhang Hai and the Qi family, would be directly monitored. It would be fine if they were killed, but if they were left alive, it would be fine. Hua Xia people were particularly united sometimes, especially when others stepped into their small circle. It was hard to say whether Zhang Hai's actions would arouse the thoughts of these people in the capital. At that time, whether they could leave or not would be another matter. After listening to Qi Li's words, the originally delicious beef suddenly became a little worse. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.